Brother, 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 that's going to make love you laugh. You bring something the other day. We don't need to escalate. See, war is not the answer. We're only love and you know we've got to find a way. You bring some love the other day. We get back and make it sound. The punishment with brutality. Talk to me so you can see what's going on. Yeah, what's going on? What's going on? You know, that's trained, that's educated, that's equipped, that's prepared to refuse. But it's safe to say that they would rather switch.
You okay?
Yeah, are you going to be broadcasting on Facebook?
Yes.
Your page, your page, or what page?
It's all politics, our local WRNU. And the R is capitalized. And it's also on YouTube. Yes, and also on YouTube.
Your mic is working, Zaid.
Mm-hmm.
All right, y'all. Welcome to All Politics Are Local, America's number one political radio talk show, broadcasted live every Friday right here at our home, right here on All Politics Are Local, WRNU Radio FM. Of course, y'all know we haven't been in the studio since March of last year, but nonetheless, we're doing our best to hold it up. With any kind of luck, we'll get back into our normal studio situation sometime this year. But nonetheless, we have an action-packed show. Of course, coming up in the first half hour is going to be, what's going on with the latest in hip-hop. DJ Rhino going to come through and, basically give us a rundown on what's going to be happening in the first half hour. DJ Rhino, you want to say what's going to be coming up in the first half hour?
Yeah, well, basically what I wanted to do, I kind of want to pick up from where we left off last week. We didn't get a chance to go into some of the people we lost in hip hop just in, the past couple weeks, before the new year got here. So yeah, I just wanted to speak on that a little bit.
Okay. All right. And then of course we got something coming up in the 6:30 half hour. And Zaid, you want to talk about what that is? What's going to be?
Oh, yeah. My bad sister from the left coast. Tanda Sizwe Shimarenga, author of No Doubt the Murders of Oscar Grant. There's been some new developments in that case. And of course, we've got some ugly new developments on the police brutality front right here in our town, unfortunately. After a whole year of going through without any incidents of that kind in this town. On New Year's Day, somebody does something terrible in the name of law and order, and it needs to be dealt with. So we will continue rocking and turning it up on the scourge of police brutality. And she's a rough sister, and I'm really glad to have her with us.
All right, and then of course y'all know coming up in the 7 o'clock hour is going to be of course the vote, and you know we're going to have all of the hosts on tonight. I've touched bases with all of them, so we hope everybody will be in the building.
It's going to be hot. Yes, we got some new voices joining us. Awesome.
Yeah, we're going to have some new hosts joining the show this year in 2021. Of course, y'all know Mitty Baraka, who is the chief of staff in our city, and for his brother, Mayor Raz J. Baraka in the city of Newark. And, of course, our sister, the champion freedom fighter all over the country, I should say all over the world, Tamika Mallory is going to be with us. And then, of course, you know, our brother, Reverend Conrad Tillett, the former hip hop minister. You know, those are the original three hosts of the votes. But, of course, joining them tonight are going to be none other than our two beloved sisters, Monifa Bandelli, and, of course, our sister, Rakia Lumumba. Brother, Zaid, I love saying those names, brother. You know what I mean?
These are two beautiful, powerful
man.
struggle that I have watched grow up from the time they were quite young.
Right.
And they are serious forces to be reckoned with. From Manhattan to Mississippi, my little sisters are banging for freedom for real.
Yeah, they ain't no joke. So
that's right.
They want, you know, them coming on and being voiced with Tamika Mallory. I mean, you know, I think I'm just gonna have to shut up tonight.
Yeah, I'm hollering that Tamika's finally back on. I've been screaming for her for months.
Yeah, you need to tell her that. I told her today. Yeah, you know, she back in the pocket. So you can tell her tonight. And so we're looking for an impactful hour with them. There's a lot going on. So you know, we can get into it.
Right now, Donna's plugging in.
So that's gonna happen at 7. And then, of course, what's going to happen at 8? I understand we're going to have our other sister coming through.
Yeah, my child is coming through. Keisha's coming through. Jonathan's going to do a segment on the question of, you know, some of the updates on the question of violence and the discussion on this whole thing of how we address this what they call the defunding the police. And of course, we could cover that. You know, that's going to be a long conversation with our sisters joining with the vote. But that's going to be part of the conversation that Jonathan is going to lead at 8 o'clock with my child Keisha Uri, Mighty Newark Anti-Violence Coalition.
Yeah,
it's been a tough week. We've got the pandemic of gun violence and the pandemic of police violence on top of the pandemic of COVID-19 that we out in the street dealing with.
All right. So that's what's going to be happening on the show. Of course, the vote is going to come up at 7 with of course all of the hosts and you know, all I can say is you know, my dad used to say, pull your britches up.
Yes, sir.
Because it's going to get.
I just say buckle up. It's going to be a rough ride, buddy.
so we expected something there. So you know, let's make that happen. So DJ Rhino, I'm gonna throw it to you, my brother.
All right. Well, basically, you know, again, you know, before the new year hit, man, we lost a couple of heads in the hip hop community. If anybody can see the shirt that I have on right now, this is the logo of the great Houdini.
One love. That's
one
right.
love. Yeah, Houdini. Houdini was definitely one of the pioneer groups to come out of Brooklyn, New York, and they proceeded and succeeded, man. Like so much, man. They did so much. We lost one of the great MC lyrical flowers of that group, which was John Fletcher, aka Ecstasy. One thing I always say about Ecstasy is that his flow was flawless. Like he had a flow, the way he rode the beat with his lyrics was unmatchable, man, and it was original. Like nobody sounded like Ecstasy, nobody. And you know, so we lost him on December 23rd. He was 56, and I'm not sure if it was COVID related. I think it was, from what I read. But I'm not definite on that. But he's gonna be missed. I mean, Houdini got together as battle MCs. They were rival MCs at the time. Jalil Hutchinson and Ecstasy. They were rival MCs in Brooklyn. But Jalil got the opportunity through Mr. Magic to do some promos for Mr. Magic, and he kind of pulled Ecstasy along with him and said, "Let's do this together." And so that's how they kind of got together as a group. Now, Mr. Magic was one of the radio DJs that was the first to play hip hop on air. And so that was like a big
yeah. Magic was at WBLS, right?
Yeah, that was WBLS. And before WBLS, he was on WHBI, which was actually located out here in Newark.
Was that underground? Was that considered underground?
Yeah, that was underground. That was NWK or something like that, WNWK, something like that, back in the day. So that was WHBI. He started there, and then he moved on to BLS. But when Jalil and Ecstasy got that opportunity, they did the promos. The promos, they became a hit, and they changed, and they created the name. I guess to kind of coincide with Mr. Magic and Magic's Wand and all of that, they created the name Houdini. Like the great Houdini, the magician. So that's where the name came from. So, but I mean, from there, they had hits like Rapping Machine, Magic's Wand, Nasty Girl. And they went on to do a Halloween favorite, which is Haunted House of Rock. That's played every year on Halloween night. They did 5 Minutes of Funk, which is the theme song for Video Music Box, Ralph McDaniels. They did Friends, which was a great single that basically just really had you open up everybody's eyes on relationships.
Friends.
Yeah, how many of us have them?
Can depend on.
That's right.
Friends.
One we can depend on. That's right. That's right. That stuff, that stuff really opened you up. That was the first time I heard something like that had a different perspective on relationships with your friends. It really made you feel like I got to start checking who I'm hanging out with. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. They also had the great hit with Freaks Come Out at Night. Freaks Come Out at Night. One Love. I mean, they had major hits, man. These guys had major hits. Funky Beat. You name it.
Let me ask you a question, Ronald. You ever seen them live?
I've seen matter of fact, yeah, I have. I've seen them live at Madison Square during the Fresh Fest, as well as Nassau Coliseum during that same tour.
Let me tell you, man, absolutely. I saw them live at the Apollo Theater.
Yeah.
And the Apollo is not that big.
Right.
But let me tell you something, man. Jalil, man, that brother, that way he used to wear that hat, brother, that leather hat.
Ecstasy, yeah. Ecstasy used to wear. He told a story. He told a story that he got that hat originally when he found that hat. It was like a wool hat or something like that. But he said he wanted it in leather, so he had it customized in leather, and that became his symbol from that point.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that was like his logo. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, whenever he performed, the way he wore the hat, it was like Zorro, man.
Yeah, yeah.
And but man, let me tell you something. Them records that they produced, man, they were major hits. I guess around the country, but they were major hits in New York when I was coming through.
That's right. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so big ups. We gotta also big up Larry Smith. Rest in peace. He was one of the producers. He was the main producer for Houdini, as well as Run DMC. And he was one who he gave Run DMC the boom bap beats, but he gave Houdini the more melodic sound. You know what I mean? He gave them the stuff that the older heads could feel. So and don't forget the videos that they put out. That's where we first saw little Jermaine Dupri with his Jerry curl.
That's right.
In the video. You know what I'm saying? That's also where we saw UTFO breakdancing.
Right.
Dr. Ice and Kango, they used to be their dancers for Houdini. So, we saw a lot of that stuff, man, back then. They opened a lot of doors and they did a lot of things that were, that were never done before in hip hop. So we got to salute Houdini, and we definitely got to salute John Fletcher, aka Ecstasy from Houdini.
Now, did they own their publishing? Do you know?
That I'm not sure. I'm sure they, I mean, guys back then, groups back then, the contracts and the knowledge of the business at that time were, it was scarce. So I really don't know that, but I have a feeling. I kind of doubt it.
Okay.
I think that's something that that a lot of artists from that era were trying to are still fighting for.
The reason I say that, Rhino, is because them records that they made, man, they could still be living off of them records, man.
Exactly.
Exactly. Because when them records come on now, I'm telling you, man, those records are period pieces, right?
Yeah.
So when they come on and you in your car, or you somewhere, you automatically go back to that time.
Yeah, they signify an era. That's right.
Exactly. Yeah. And those were hit records, man.
Right. Man.
And that's why they were able to tour even today on that music, man.
Yeah.
Because them brothers, like the OJs, them brothers. I mean, think about the OJs. They in their 80s, man, and they still on all of them records Kenny Gamble and them made for them. They haven't made new records, but people want to come just to hear those classics.
That's right.
It's funny you say the OJs. I was thinking of the song "Friends" is right up there with Life Lessons with the OJ song. That OJs did the song about money, right?
By the way, what's up, Don?
Hey,
For the love of money.
Yeah, for the love of money. So it makes you think. So when you hear those songs, it just gets your brain to thinking. But thinking of Houdini and like you were saying, the hat that the little hat that was something that was a staple, and which is actually a very trendy hat right now in fashion. But Houdini, that whole era of music, if you go out to an event right now, they're in demand. If it wasn't in terms of concerts pre-COVID, those concerts were demanding more than, or just as much, I might say, as current artists. They have maintained, you go see what they term an old school classic or whatever hip hop concert. They are in high demand.
Yeah. Something about Houdini, the way they moved with a lot of integrity and class. You know what I mean? Like they were a lot more mature than a lot of the other groups that were out at that time. So I love the way they carried themselves. But real quick, because time is short, there's two others. One other I want to say, rest in peace, Adolfo Quinones, aka Shabba-Doo, aka Ozone from Breaking.
I did not realize that he was one of the original Lockers.
Lockers, yes. Him as well as Fred Berry. Listen, Fred Berry, rest in peace, Fred Berry, who played Rerun. And Tony Basil.
Yeah, I'm one of the old street heads that was too macho to dance until I saw them.
Right.
And that's a whole West Coast kind of thing that the Lockers did, right?
Yeah.
But he was from East Coast. He's from out this way. Right, but
he was originally from Chicago. He was originally from Chicago. He grew up in the Cabrini Green houses.
And then he went west. Yes,
and then he went west. That's right.
When they would do that, I'm like, damn.
Yeah. So he was a great choreographer. He was, of course, he was the legendary Ozone in the movie Breaking, along with Turbo.
That's where I remember him from, But when I found out that he was one of the Lockers, I said, "Oh my God, they were killers!" Man,
you can go to YouTube now and just type up the Lockers, and you can just watch a bunch of those clips.
Oh my God!
Yeah, I love that stuff. Man. I love watching that stuff.
Now, Brian, did he ever make it to Linkin Park? Because they have that whole segment with the breakdancing during the music festival. Has he?
I don't remember. I'm not sure if Shabba-Doo showed up. I feel like he may have at some point, maybe one year he did, but I'm not definite on that.
Yeah, that's another thing, right? You think about, COVID knocked out that whole part. You know what I mean?
Just everything, right? Man. All the events, the shows.
Yeah.
The DJing,
Yeah.
All right, and one last one, which was a strange one. Like we got the news right before the new year came. Right before the new year came, we got this news about MF Doom passing away. Now, I don't know if all you guys know about MF Doom. MF Doom was basically your favorite rapper's favorite rapper. He was an underground rapper. I guess I got to take it back real quick. MF Doom is a UK MC. He's from Britain, and he came out in the late '80s with a group called KMD. Him and his brother Sub Rock, who passed. They were in a group called KMD. Now, when Sub Rock died, his brother Sub Rock died, Zev Love X kind of went just underground for a while. And then when he resurfaced wearing a mask that resembled Doom from the comic books. So that became his thing, wearing the mask, and he took on the name MF Doom. He's your favorite. When I say your favorite rapper, like people like Yasin Bey, Mos Def. There's a clip on YouTube where he's just reciting MF Doom verses word for word and doing it with passion and excitement. Like MF Doom, if you ever get a chance to just pull up some YouTube stuff of MF Doom and just listen to the lyrics, listen to the beats. He's done so much work. This is one of those unspoken geniuses who he sounds like he just sits in his lab and just records and does nothing else but record lyrics and makes beats and records lyrics to his beats. He has worked with artists like Mos Def, Ghostface Killah, Danger Mouse, the producer Madlib, and he has all of these projects where they combine their names and stuff like Mad Villain. That's because he calls himself the Villain also. The Villain, Metal Fingers, Metal Face, but they put together these projects like Mad Villain is Madlib and MF Doom together. Def Doom is a project that he did with Mos Def. So it's stuff like that. Danger Doom, stuff that he did with Danger Mouse, the producer, DJ. So this guy he's very different. He's very unsung, but he's loved across the world. I mean, you can see like literally in Amsterdam and in Berlin, there are paintings and murals of MF Doom. There have been murals of MF Doom painted on the front, where they put the mask on the front of the train, whatever their transit system is out there, their trains. It's just amazing how the entire globe has shown love for MF Doom. Like this guy is so underground, you wouldn't even think that he would be so big, but he was huge. But what's so strange, and this is why I said this was like the most awkward one, is that we got the word of MF Doom's death New Year's Eve before the ball dropped, but the word is that he died on Halloween of this year. He died October 31st of this year, but nobody knew about it for 2 months.
Why is that?
Yeah,
I'm guessing his family was just trying to keep it all under wraps for a while. That's all. That's the only explanation I have for that, is that the family was trying to just kind of keep it on the low for a while. But it was very strange. I mean, and it's so strange to the point that people who know how awkward and strange and different MF Doom was, they thought it was a joke. They thought this was something that one of his little games that he was doing. But he died on Halloween, and we didn't get the word of it until New Year's Eve.
And do anybody know what the cause of death was?
I believe that was COVID.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just reading. It said no cause, and I don't know. I came on late. And how any word on Dr. Dre?
Dr. Dre, Dr. Dre he was hospitalized because he had a brain aneurysm. From what I heard, he's doing a lot better. He put out a statement saying that he was doing well, he would be home soon. So we're still waiting on the status of that. But from what I understand, he's doing okay.
Very few people survive brain aneurysms.
Yes.
Right? We're a couple of days away from the birthday of Khalid Abdul Muhammad. That's the official cause of death of what took him out of here.
No,
Yeah.
you're right. Many people don't. My sister died from a brain aneurysm as well. Yeah, it broke and she died.
Sneaky.
Yeah,
I was, you know, I have a sleep disorder, but my symptoms were so bad at one point. I had a neurologist who thought I had some microaneurysms on my head. Talk about nervous, because I know where that stuff could go. But they are dangerous, and they can go undetected and just pow you out of here.
yeah.
So definitely prayers out to Dr. Dre, man. Get well soon, get home soon. And rest in peace to MF Doom. He was 49 years old.
Whew.
Yeah, he was a young cat.
And DJ,
That's the thing, man. Like, it's like we losing all these brothers and sisters today, man, and they're young. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
yo, what is the real cause of this? Is it? I mean, it can't just be our diet. You know what I mean? It's got to be something else, man. I think that's part of it, but I don't think that's
it's
just
definitely a big part of it, though.
and
Diet's
Rhino,
a big part of it.
Rhino, I was looking at WP Channel 11 News this morning, and they have a setup on maybe the second hour, and they have a DJ in there, and he gave a whole segment about he was sporting different T-shirts, and you would see the change because he wanted to promote small businesses. So I thought of you today. He did. The DJ was doing a whole T-shirt thing. So.
Yeah.
I know we only got 3 minutes, but DJ Rhino, any word on the hip hop and what they thought of Wednesday, or no? Is it just no comment?
Yeah, I haven't seen any comment of anything yet. But I mean, everybody saw the insanity. Nobody's happy about that. And I mean, we just need to see what happens after this. We'll see how serious these arrests are. They said they arrested some folks. We'll see we'll see what sticks. We've been through some of this before. We've never had that happen before, but we've been through these kind of things before. As far as people getting arrested for the dirt they did, and then they just get a slap on the wrist or whatever. So we'll see what happens. We'll see. But as far as the hip hop community, I haven't heard but so much stuff.
We'll see it in lyrics probably.
Yeah. Hopefully it'll be in the lyrics.
Manifested in the work. Yeah.
Yeah. Indeed. And also speaking, because we mentioned diet earlier, and we mentioned Dr. Dre. I want to talk about the other Dr. Dre. The other Dr. Dre, he just recently had his leg amputated. He's gone blind. And this is all from results of his diabetic situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, man. Like everybody, and this is for myself. We're all in it. We're all guilty of it, man. But we definitely got to get our diet straight. We got to get our diet straight, because how we gonna fight for the future of our communities, the future of our families, if we're not gonna be here?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? We got to be here, and then we're dealing with COVID. We definitely got to keep our immune systems like as strong as possible. We got to keep our minds strong, clear, focused. Keep our bodies strong, man. Let's just do what we got to do, man. Survive. We're in survival mode right now.
Yeah, it's diet and it's exercise, right?
Yeah,
I think it's both
lifestyle
and it's spiritual, right? I think all of those things I think we've got to do, but we also got to pay attention to staying safe, right? Like a lot of our people aren't really following the rules, man. Right. I mean, I see a cat online on Facebook every now and then in a gym, and hardly anybody in that damn gym got a mask on, and all of the people in that gym are black, and and I'm like, wow. I'm like, so ain't nobody really practicing being safe. COVID is still running rampant, and there's a new strain out here. So I mean, it's no wonder that our community, our young people dying in their 40s and 50s.
Yeah, it's crazy. And now it's not just the elders they're saying. Now the young ones are getting it too.
That's
kids are getting it too.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so people aren't really safe, and and we got to realize this thing is a lung disease that is passed right in the air. You can breathe this stuff in, and this stuff can literally kill you.
Yeah.
And so when you see, I heard the mayor say this today on his live. When you see folks you know, getting it and then going back home and giving it to Big Mama. And then Big Mama, she, you know, she getting sick. She can't survive it. Now you lose Big Mama. Now everybody get put in the street. Why? Because everybody was busy living with Big Mama.
Big Mama, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
And so you just said our physical, our mental, and you know, and then you know, and then the other, our financial. How are we just preparing? You know, how are we preparing ourselves for the longevity? And just think of Big Mama, who had much less than all of us, but sustained all of us. You know what I'm saying? Just because Big Mama had wisdom, yeah. So.
But that's what's happening, right? The majority of young kids, right? You know, children are living with their grandmothers, right? While their mother and father is somewhere else in the street, right? And they living with her. And if they're not being safe, they come home and kill her. Now all of a sudden, everybody homeless.
Yeah,
You know,
for Big Mama, because Big Mama's going.
yes,
It's the whole thing is
right.
Because Big Mama was the one handling the business too. You know,
Right. She handling the business, right? She making sure people eat. She making sure people got a place to live, right? While they all being careless. And I'm telling you, I saw, I'm gonna talk to you, Zaid, offline because I you know who this dude is, you know, and I'm like, yo, man, you know what's with this cat? And I heard the mayor talk about it today, and I'm like, yo, somebody need to say something to this brother, pull him up and say, yo, man. You know, you just straight up not paying attention to none of the rules that the mayor got going on in the city, brother. You know, but you online every day, damn near you post and hardly anybody got a mask on.
Oh my God!
One of the things that we've not talked about
in terms of the siege or Trump's insurrection was that this was a major and an intentional disease spreader event. All right, if you pay attention to the rally that suit them crazy people up to do what they did before they moved, they deliberately said that they were going to roll like that. And we ain't talking a few. We ain't talking about 100 people or 200 people. We're talking about a huge March on Washington mass-sized crowd of some crazy white folks, man, spreading that stuff all over the place. Wantingly, willingly, on top of the other evil intent that was guiding their actions that day, right? And that hasn't been talked about in terms of all of the mess that they did. That was a dangerously destructive thing rooted in the worst and most savage tendencies in their history of death and destruction that we definitely need to be taking stock on.
Yeah. I don't think there was any events that we had around, you know, George Floyd or any of the other rallies over the summer. I don't think there were any rallies we had where you had people that you know, you had some people may have not have had masks, but for the mass majority of the people in those rallies wore masks.
And all had masks for people who didn't have them.
Right. People were trying to make sure other people were safe. Yeah. You know, and if people were around you, you were like, yo, man, you need to put a mask on. But you know, I mean but those events, man, are held for those particular reasons, man, because there's some people in this country, unfortunately, that's what they want to do, man. They want to spread that kind of death to everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got to be, and you know what, what's always unfortunate is when somebody who didn't wear a mask comes back and says is sitting somewhere on a ventilator or oxygen saying, listen, I didn't believe, but I'm here to tell you, and you know, but you spread it to how many people now? It's and when you still hear people doing that, I think there was somebody from Florida that just posted up this week. I was the person who didn't wear a mask, but now I'm sitting here on a ventilator. This thing is real, and we got to be It's very basic things that you could do to help you, help your family, and help the community. And when people don't do it, it's very frustrating.
Yeah, Ice Cube's father-in-law almost went out of here behind that foolishness.
Hey, I just thought I would jump in.
There he is.
Yeah, were you guys talking about? Were you talking about the white riot? Yes, on Wednesday.
remember we had a judge's lounge.
Were you talking about the white riot on Wednesday, and you were talking about them not wearing masks?
Wow, what's all that feedback?
It's funny because my students were like the same thing when they were writing about it. They were like, "Yo, this was terrible. They trashed the Capitol. They did all the white nationalists.
Jonathan,
they weren't wearing what?
You got a lot of feedback, man.
I will say no.
Oh, okay, my bad. Let me just change up. I probably got a lot of feedback right now. I'm gonna jump out. I'm gonna jump back in. I'm gonna tell the story. Hold up.
He got John gonna jump into the conversation. And he bringing all of the damn feedback. And he don't want to tell us to mute our mics. You know what I mean? Mute our background. Wear headphones. And he gonna come in with everything. Completely outrageous, man. You know.
It's time to Sizway on. We can get ready to start. Get ready for this next segment too. She should be back.
Yeah, so that's all I got, y'all. That's hip hop, man. So rest in peace, Ecstasy of Houdini.
Yeah.
Rest in peace, Shabba-Doo of the Lockers, and rest in peace, MF Doom. We're gonna miss all of y'all, man.
You know, we may want to think about doing a whole segment that, you know, hip hop and COVID.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right? Have some mature voices from hip hop, you know, because we've all lost somebody. You know,
Yeah.
and have a real session and just how that has really played out right within, you know, the generation. Yes.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, people trying to act like things are normal. We're not living in normal times. I'm telling y'all, man, this thing is not normal. Imagine if Dick Gregory was still here. You know what I mean? Because
just listening to him the other day. Mm-hmm.
Dick was the brother who told us.
He's raising hell right now.
Yeah, man, because he told us, you know, I remember, man, you know, talking to Dick down in Philadelphia when I was down there training back in the day. And I remember Dick came to Joe Frazier's gym one day, man. We sitting there, him and Joe talking, and then all of us, all the boxers sat around. And he told this story, right? He said, let me tell you something. He said, let me tell you how sinister this country is. He said, man, when they practice germ warfare, he said they can put something in a light bulb in Joe Frazier's gym. And he said, man, you're coming in like he's in a maintenance suit. And he said, when that light blow out, he said, what is ever in that light bulb will go all over the gym. And he said, when it's done, he said, when you guys are in here breathing and pandering and boxing, he said, by the time you leave, all of y'all will have cancer. Right? And he said he could go and do that in a train station.
People forget about the book that he co-authored with Mark Lane called Code Name Zorro.
Yeah.
On the assassination of Dr. King and the role of the national security state in assassination. Dick was no joke. He was not just a health guru. He was one of the wisest political sages who transformed himself on the comedy stage, by the way. We're talking about Richard Pryor, right? Into becoming one of our legendary freedom fighters. This is a great
story. But Dick Gregory believed in research too, man.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he had the receipts, man. Right. You know, I mean, he was able to go and get all of this research. He would come with stacks and stacks of notes, and he would prove his case, man. You know, so it's just out of control, man. Welcome back, John.
Jonathan,
hey,
back with the
how are
feedback.
Do I have the feedback? Am I good?
Still got a little bit.
It's a little bit.
Yeah.
You got your mic?
Yeah. You still got a little feedback, but you're a little better than you were.
Hold on. Let me see if I have anything going on here.
But Zaid, I think I see your guest, man.
Yes, she is here. Mm-hmm.
I'm here.
Yes, the great time that says with Chimaranga have the great right?
Greetings, how y'all doing?
Good evening, happy New Year.
Jonathan, you all right?
Yep, I'm good. I'm good.
All right, okay.
I'm just trying to figure out where it is coming from. I have all these different things open. I'm doing like three things at once.
Mute yourself and let's make sure it's you. So mute yourself.
All right.
Yes,
there's you. Trying to help you out there. Yes, you.
Our big dog got the sound cooties.
Well, Zaid, why don't you get in?
I've been hijacked.
No, you was enjoying that white ride too much.
I said White Riot, and all of a sudden, wow.
Well,
Hey, Jair, why don't you go ahead and introduce your
yes,
guest? Man?
yes. Tanda Sizwe Chimarenga is amongst us. A dear friend and comrade from the West Coast. Got an important book that she did called No Doubt: The Murders of Oscar Grant. And of course, New Year's Day, quiet as it's kept, is the anniversary of Oscar Grant's killing by a Bay Area police officer back on January 1st, 2009. Of course, that story in that film was immortalized in the film that a young man from Newark did by the name of Michael B. Jordan playing that role. And I should also add that there's another Newark-like police case parallel, and we had a case right around the same time, a young brother named Shaquan Nance, who was killed by Newark police in handcuffs, right? So, and then there's been recent developments that in terms of the family trying to make plain or make happen on that front. And of course, just as we go into before we get to the white riot, Trump and his cousins, right? We had our first police killing in Newark in a good while, right, on New Year's Day. And then you get the Jacob Blake, the new development in the Jacob Blake story, where the officer who popped 7 bullets into this young man's back in front of everybody, right, when he posed no threat to no one, just trying to get away from the drama and get his kids away from the drama. Of course, it's not going to face any charges. And Kenosha had a straight up uprising when that went down. Let us not forget. And of course, it's in Kenosha where that crazy young white boy Kyle Rittenhouse goes in and pops off several people, 17 years old, right? And treated like a hero amongst these same kind of folks that just stormed the Capitol. So when we talk about, we bring Tanda Sizwe on and talk about not just Oscar Grant, we're talking about the relevance of this issue, how hot it is, and all the layers that we have to face as we deal with it in this particular moment, right? So Tanda Sizwe, I want to welcome you to the show, welcome you to our family, welcome to our circle, right? I want to salute you.
Thank you.
The work you have done and have been doing for so many years. The book is important. It's an important read. One of the things that's deep, and we may want to start with that, is that for a scourge that has been with us since the beginning of policing in this country, there's actually very little books coming our community on the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But she got one. She got a good one that we need to use. It's, we're based out of Rutgers, Newark. So this is a broad institutional question that we're raising to our folks who coming through these corridors who have the capacity to do this kind of stuff. You know, we talk about fighting to be free, and we ain't dealing with what we actually fighting and facing. We're missing something. So I want to just deal with that, and you can jump in wherever you want to jump in on that kind of way from what's happening with Oscar's case. The bigness of Oscar's case, what went down with Oscar's case, and how that relates to what we got going on the national front.
And sir, what's the name of the book again?
No Doubt: The Murders of Oscar Grant, and that murders is plural. And she'll unpack that.
Yeah, so thanks so much, brother. Appreciate you and all the work you've been doing, and thank you for having me on the show today. Greetings to all of your comrades who are here with you. And I guess we could start by talking about, I believe it was Rodney King, the Rodney King case in 92. For the most part, that was like the start for most of us. We had never seen anything like that before because it had never been videotaped before. Most of our communities were witness to that type of brutality, and we all said the same thing. Oh, y'all got it recorded now. And because it was recorded, we thought that there would be some justice in the courts, and we saw what happened, right? And so that was in 92. And then we fast forward to 2009, and once again, we had never seen anything like this before. We had never seen an actual killing, an actual shooting caught on tape. And we were like, okay, we got this on tape, right? We gonna do it this time, right? And no, Johannes Mehserle the Bay Area cop who killed Oscar Grant, was indicted for homicide, for murder. He was convicted of involuntary manslaughter. He was sentenced to 2 years in state prison, but he ended up doing 11 months total because of what you have called good time. So from the time that he was arrested through his trial and through sentencing, they added all those days up. You get 1 day good time for every day you spend in jail. So he ended up doing just under a year in prison for the murder of Oscar Grant. And it was a murder. Involuntary manslaughter is a form of homicide, is a form of murder. And I wrote the book after covering the trial. I attended every day for about, except for maybe 3 days, got the transcripts to the trial, in addition to my own analysis and thoughts. And I felt like this is just something that I need to bring to my community. And so wrote the book, The Murders of Oscar Grant. And I called it The Murders because Oscar Grant was murdered by Johannes Meserly. And after that, he was murdered by the media. And then he was murdered by the courts.
Right.
So it was actually a triple murder. And that's something that happens to the majority of our brothers and sisters who are murdered by the police. They are murdered in the court system, which finalizes it. They're murdered by the media to justify the police murder.
Yes.
Right? Their character is assassinated. Their home life is taken apart. You know, even with Tamir Rice, you know, you think, well, my God, this is a child. There's nothing they could possibly do to Tamir Rice, right? And if you go back and check the media, you'll see only a few days after Tamir Rice was murdered, because he was 12 years old, they couldn't outright attack him. What did they do? They did an article looking at the background of his mother and father, looking at their quote unquote criminal records. They said in an attempt to see if he had been raised around violence, because my God, why would a 12-year-old child be playing with a toy gun? Probably because he's a child and it's a toy. That's probably why a 12-year-old child is playing with a gun. But as you know, Black people, Black children are criminalized. And so it can't just be a child playing with a gun. It's got to be something wrong with this picture. Don't get me started.
And the Justice Department just cleared the officer that took him out within the last couple of weeks too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I read someplace where Tamir Rice would have been the class of 2020.
Yeah. Well, what was that?
12 when he was shot, and then he would be about time to graduate.
He would have graduated from high school.
That's right.
Graduated in high school in the spring.
Yes.
Yeah, 6 years, approximately 6 years ago. So with the Oscar Grant case, some of the things that have been happening here in California, they seem pretty exciting, but we have to be always on guard. We have to be always on watch. What I mean by that is there was a bill that came out last year, Senate Bill 1421. I'm trying to look it up now. Senate Bill 1421. It was a police transparency law, which means that everything related to police that has been sealed or personnel records or what have you, it has to be released to the public. And so when Oscar Grant was killed, the Bay Area Rapid Transit Authority, that was the organization that hired the cops, the transit cops, which killed Oscar Grant, they did a background report on the entire situation. And this report was sealed. There was a sanitized public version that was referred to in the trial, which is a public undertaking that was released with the other public documents. I had access to it, but the entire 100 and something page document was sealed and hidden. This was in 2009, 2010. Based upon this bill passing in 2019, that report was now made available to the public. And in the bill, it talked about, in the report, it talked about how investigators doubted Johannes Meserly's lie, in which he said, I meant to tase Oscar Grant, and I ended up pulling my gun, and that's how I ended up shooting him. It also talked about the conduct of another officer that night by the name of Anthony Peroni, who created the chaos, not only created the chaos on the platform, but brutalized Oscar Grant prior to his being shot. And so the family came forward after the release of that information and demanded that the Alameda County District Attorney reopen this case, go back and look at it, and specifically they're asking that Anthony Peroni be charged with murder also, just like Johannes Messerly. And in my book, I actually argued that Messerly and Peroni should have been charged with felony murder at the time. Now, as you know, murder is a state charge. It's not a federal offense. And each state has its own determinants for what murder is. If you're like me and you got your law degree from Law and Order, you think you know what you're talking about. Well, there's got to be malicious intent and in order for it to be first degree. No, felony murder is any death that occurs as a result of a felony. So what does that mean? What that means is, Zaid, I kidnap you. I'm going to hold you for ransom.
I ain't got no money.
Well, some folks who like you might have some money, right? So I'm going to hold you for ransom. And I tie you up in my basement. And I decide I'm going to go out and do some shopping, run some errands. Maybe I've tied your mouthpiece too tight and you suffocate. Or maybe you're, because of the fact that you've been kidnapped and this has never happened to you before, you don't know what's going to happen. You get anxiety, your heart rate increases, and you end up dying. My intent was never to kill you. I need you alive in order to get some money. So it was never my intent to kill you. However, as a result of my actions, what I created, you end up dying. I can be charged with first degree murder in your death.
And anybody with you.
Even though all I was trying to do was kidnap you.
Right.
Kidnapping is bad enough, but now I'm going to be charged with your murder. Say another example. Let's say I rob a house. I mean, clean it out. I'm taking the refrigerator. I'm taking the stove, in addition to the big screen TV. And as I am fleeing and I get on the highway, let's say that the refrigerator or the washing machine comes loose. It falls on the highway. Cars behind me swerve to miss it and crash, or they run into it and crash, and the driver or passenger dies. I can now be charged with their death as a felon under the felony murder rule. Any death because of breaking and entering, and I stole from you, right? So any death that occurs as a result of a felony, you can be charged with the commission of that murder, of what caused that person's death. So what I argued in the book was that as a result of the mayhem that was created on that platform, that subway platform, and as a result of Messerly and Peroni torturing Oscar Grant, they should have been charged with felony murder.
Exactly.
And the torture comes in with the fact that you've got Anthony Peroni, 180, 200 pounds, kneeling on Oscar Grant's head and neck. Oscar Grant is prone on his stomach on the platform. Peroni's kneeling on his head or his neck. Messerly, another 180, 200 pounds, is kneeling on his feet, on his legs. He's not going anywhere. He's no threat to anyone.
He's handcuffed.
Why are you trying? He's not handcuffed. Not at that point. He was not handcuffed. Why are you trying to tase him? Why are you tasing him for what? There's no need unless you're trying to torture him. And again, everything that happened, all of the chaos that happened as a result of Peroni's actions coming onto the platform. One of the witnesses testified she took out her camera, and because remember, this is, if you saw the movie Fruitvale Station, that would save a lot of time for me. This subway train is now stopped. It's not moving. It's not going anywhere because BART police have been called to see about a fight. So they're looking for people. One of the witnesses testified she took out her camera and started videotaping because she heard this noise, somebody banging and cussing. She's looking around. Who is it? Oh, it's this cop. That's Peroni, cursing at people, dragging people off the train, slamming them on the ground, slamming them up against the wall. He created all of that chaos. He should have been sitting right next to Johannes Messerly being tried for the murder of Oscar Grant. So that was one of the issues that has come up in California, Senate Bill 1421, which talks about transparency, which is something very few police departments have. Excuse me, across the country. Usually you have filed a complaint against a police officer. You can't even find out the status of your complaint and what happened to that complaint, because 9 times out of 10, it's considered a personnel issue and it's shielded from the public.
Now, let me ask you a question. We got about 5 minutes. I want to ask you a question. Is there anyone else that wrote a book as extensive as yours on Brother Oscar Grant?
And to my knowledge, no book has been written on Oscar Grant. He's been mentioned, but no book has been written. And this was on, the trial. This was not on the movement. That story has still needs to be told. Of course, the film, a fictionalized account looking at his last day, it didn't go into the movement. It didn't go into the trial. To my knowledge, my book is the only one that talks about the trial and gives an analysis of the trial and of society and how this happened. Excuse me.
And is your book self-print or
it's self-published?
Self-published.
So unfortunately, it's only available through Amazon.
Okay. And how is the book doing?
Well, it came out in 2014.
Okay.
So it was very popular in the beginning.
Yeah.
But again, of course, since time has passed on, people forget about it. Then when Oscar Grant, okay, they Google it, they find out about the book. But again, to my knowledge, no one has written on this. I've gotten sales from universities using it in their classrooms. That's always a good help.
So it's almost like
somebody stole my copy. I got to replace it. You might know the suspect.
Somebody stole your copy, huh? Well,
Yeah.
So it's almost like the
they
book
read it.
was set by the door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually can only think of one other book off the top of my head that addresses the issue. That's Policing Black Bodies, that Smith and Hattery did. But there are very few books really out on this question. There've been some good studies. In fact, one of Monifa's organizations did an important study every 28 hours, every 36 hours, right? Somebody's being killed by the police. The Malcolm X grassroots movement, right? But in terms of actual Doc really taking this stuff apart and really laying out what it means institutionally ultimately, there's very little done on that, and I think it's something that as a budding student of scholarship, it's something I think those of us who have that capacity really need to address.
Absolutely, most definitely. I know you said you had to go, but was there something else you wanted to talk to me about?
We could talk all day, but I want how do you see? All the stuff that's going on this front now, and we're getting ready for a new administration on the national stage and whatnot. How do you see the whole question of the fight against police brutality going on? Where should it go now, right? Given these new dynamics, which really ain't that new, but these new dynamics that we're facing as we are about to begin the end of the Trump years, and we can never get him the hell out of the White House with his crazy germ spreading self.
And let me couple that so you can answer all of this at the same time. Mm-hmm. What is your view on this concept that white folks and Republicans are fighting against, called defund the police? What's your view on that?
What is my view on defunding the police?
Yes.
I'm for anything that chips away at the power of police. That's first of all. Second of all, police are not the answer to every issue.
Right.
Number one. That's number two. Number three, they don't even serve as good deterrents in many instances, because that's essentially, that's not the history and the purpose of policing, but that's one of the bill of goods we've been sold, that it's a deterrent. You don't want to go to jail. You don't want me to call the police. And jail, just like someone once told me, locks and lights are for law-abiding people. Whoever's going to come up in your house is going to come up in your house. They don't care about no dog. They don't care about no bars. They don't care about none of that stuff, right? So police are for law-abiding people. But when you have someone who's having a mental health episode, right? Police are not the answer for that. They exacerbate the situation. Maybe a third of police killings of people of color, of black people, those people had mental disabilities, either mental or physical disabilities. So the defunding of the police, which is the shifting of monies out of these police budgets, which are bloated, which would take up a ridiculous amount of money, needs to go to mental health services, to drug rehab services, into job creation, into creating parks and green spaces where black children can play. And if they want to play with a toy gun, it's goddamn okay. I'm sorry, it's okay.
Now you okay?
The budgets that the cities claim they can't do for all of these other services is because the police departments have taken up too much money. So when it says defund the police, I'm all for it.
Well, we need more time with you, sis. 'Cause I was about to ask another question, but the segment is already coming to an end. But this is your first
And I don't
time
think I
here.
answered. It was another question I was supposed
no,
to
go
answer.
ahead. You're right. I'm sorry.
I get carried away. You got to stop me. So I
No,
don't even
go
know
ahead.
if I answered the other question. I was
Go
on
ahead.
defund the police.
I wanted you to look at the big picture of the question. Where should the fight for police brutality be going? How should we attack the question of police brutality with the transition of the so-called Biden-Harris leadership?
Well, if you're looking at it from the Biden-Harris perspective, you're dealing with legislation, you're dealing with policies, which is long and tedious, right? So we need to have policies where police are decertified. They can lose their certification based upon certain things that happen. A police officer can be accused of all kinds of things, can even be charged with some things. But as long as they still have their license to be a police officer, they will stay on the force, which is ridiculous. So we need to deal with decertification. We need to deal with defunding of the police. We need to deal with these police unions and these police contracts that are negotiated that shield police from accountability in the form of police bill of rights. Right. That's on the legislative level. On the grassroots level, during the time of enslavement, when African people, the passage of the fugitive slave law, which deputized any white person and made it their duty to return a fugitive African to enslavement, which even caught up free Africans in enslavement. And if the slave catchers or whoever came on the scene to snatch someone, the people would surround them and unarrest them, spirit them away to freedom. We need that exact same mentality on the grassroots level. What do I mean by that? You've got your policy level and legislative, and then you got your grassroots work. The sister who recorded George Floyd, that was a 17-year-old child.
That's right.
I don't expect anything of her.
That's right.
But a man, and I'm going to be sexist. I'm going to go there. I'm going to internalize patriarchy. There should have been a man somewhere in that crowd that came over and knocked that cop on his ass, kneeling on a black man's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds.
Knew he was on film, didn't care.
That's not the police work that our communities need. He should have absolutely been knocked on his ass. Someone, okay, if not a man, 2 women, 3 women, someone should have broke through the crowd and knocked him on his ass. That's the kind of thing we're going to have to start doing.
So, go ahead.
You know what has happened is that, just like they did, during slavery, they put so much fear in black folk, that we can literally see somebody commit a murder with it and have a smirk on their face while they're doing it. And nobody does anything to stop it, right? Because of the way this judicial system has put such fear in black people that we can be murdered in broad daylight by people who got a flag and a badge.
So
what I did want you, are you familiar with the Breathe Act?
Cursory.
Okay, so I know that's something that our next segment, when the sister's coming up, but this is something that we all of our local state grassroots organizations should be helping bring this to the table.
Most
As
definitely.
in terms of from a grassroots position, how we can help legislation be put forth. So just want to make sure. But we have an important question, and this is your first time here. And this is a political, but it's also a hip hop show. So our question is, who is your favorite hip hop artist and or group that you're listening to now?
Ooh, that I'm listening to now?
It doesn't have to be now.
Yeah,
Whoever come to your mind, who you dig.
Okay.
Well, in terms of hip hop, because really right now I've been listening to house music. So I know you said hip hop. I've been listening to house, deep house, South African house. But if I had to say hip hop, I remember like the 93, 94, whatever, like the golden age, what I call the golden age of hip hop before I tuned out. I would have to say, in terms of a group, A Tribe Called Quest, and in terms of one artist, Lauryn Hill. Golden age.
All right.
Other hands from Brooklyn.
Well, thank you. And what part? You're out west, you said?
I'm in Los Angeles.
You're in LA. Okay.
So I don't even know the underground. Like I said, I stopped listening at a certain point. I couldn't even tell you the underground rappers out here in LA. So I know my card is gonna be snatched. I know it. I know.
No. You with some health heads here. You're okay. You with some health
I can flee to the East Coast. I come to the East Coast then.
Well, sister, we want to thank you so much for coming through and spending some time with us. And
thank you for having me.
And you have an open door policy, sister, to come back anytime you want.
Okay.
Have you back.
This is America's #1 political hip hop radio talk show. Thank you. Normally we would be in the studio. Next time you come through, hopefully we'll be back in our building. All right.
Okay,
so thank you, sister.
Thank you again. Peace.
All right, on Sunday. Yeah.
So listen, y'all, we got some of the vote guests and standing in the back. We're gonna start bringing them through. Mitty just hit me up, so we're expecting he'll be tapping in a minute.
Oh, Mitty's gonna be in? Okay.
Yeah, he just hit me up. So, hopefully everybody be able to start tapping in. I think I see Conrad. I think I understand, Sister Bendelli is back there. There she go. So everybody start coming through. So welcome to the vote. Of course, y'all know that if this is the second Friday, y'all know it is time for the vote. And Sister Monifa Bendelli, I like saying her last name, right? Her last name is just so strong. When you say Bendelli, you expect powerful things to happen. When Bendelli is in the building, okay, well, we know it's going to be some black talk for real now. So we want to welcome y'all to the vote. Of course, she is joining the show. This is her first night in the building. Of course, Conrad doesn't need any introduction. Of course, everybody know our beloved brother. And so Reverend Conrad Tillett is with us. Mitty just hit me up. So hopefully he'll be chiming in a minute. We're waiting on all of the other folks. I spoke to Tamika today. I spoke with Rakia. So hopefully everybody will be coming through. So why don't we go on and get some things started? And as people come in, we'll get them in the conversation. But we wanted to get started. We've been holding off on this, Monifa and Brother Conrad. We've been holding off on this because I know we all got some feelings about this, right? White folk are going off all over the country, and everybody is trying to draw this comparison, right? Well, y'all know that if this was the Black Lives Matters, there would be dead people all over the place, right? Well, we know that. We don't think we need y'all to tell us that, right? Black folk know that. Even the congressman texted me, and when he saw it, right, we checked on him this week, and when we checked on him, Brother Conrad, the first thing he said when he saw it, he said there had been at least 10 people killed just trying to go toward the building because of the difficulty it is for them to get in. So, I mean, just imagine that, just in of itself. So I don't want to give y'all my feelings. I'm sure y'all got some feelings about it. So let me let you get started, Monifa, and give me your viewpoint on what you saw today.
Yeah, I mean, really, we don't actually have to imagine, back in 2013, a Black woman who was suffering from postpartum depression. Sister Shimarenga just talked about what happens when we're having an emotional health episode, was driving her car in DC, and she ran into the barricades at the Capitol. So if you saw some of the images on Wednesday, there's like these cinder blocks that come after the gates that this mob went through. So further down the road, there's some cinder blocks, and her car crashed into that. And Capitol Police opened fire on her. They shot and killed her, shot her in the back 5 times. Her name was Miriam Carey. And so we don't have to imagine. She didn't even make it out the car. They didn't ask her nothing. Like, it was just bang, 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 bang. So yes, people are saying, oh, imagine this and imagine that. I mean, the Capitol Police are armed. They can shoot and kill people, which eventually did happen later on in that day. And so it's just a painful reminder. It's so triggering. And then also the other image that we saw later in the day of our workers, Black workers, it looked like they were all Black and brown workers inside the Capitol, cleaning up the mess that had been left by these rioters, right? They were who had done all, I mean, people think it was just broken glass. They urinated. I mean, I just don't even want, it's so disgusting, right? And so here we are seeing these images of Black people sweeping and mopping and cleaning up this disgustingness. So yeah, if you're unclear at this time, if you're confused right now about white supremacy, about state violence, even about white privilege, then something is really going on wrong with you. It was so crystal clear that we could not have done that. Even when we go to the Capitol with appointments, which I have done, and you go through the metal detectors and you may have petitions maybe, and you have some things, letters that you want to give representatives. Sometimes they'll tell you, you can't take that in. No, we're not gonna, you have too many papers, they stop people at the door. So this is something that was just really, you have to laugh to keep from crying.
Brother Conrad, you muted. You got to unmute yourself, brother.
I certainly agree. First of all, good evening, everyone. It's good to be here with you always. And I certainly agree with my sister, my neighbor here in Bedford-Stuyvesant. And I think that what is really interesting is that, as we talk about this double standard, the sheer way in which white groups, when they gather, the way they approach authority, Sister Monifa talked about our workers. Let me say, those workers are good government workers in DC, and folks in DC have good government jobs. They're very well paid, and they're all right. They'll be okay. But I thought, to bring up one of our workers, did you see the Capitol police officer literally as he was facing the charging, surging crowd? He tried to mount a defense and resistance, but ultimately, God knows what he saw in terms of the numbers. But the sheer way that one of the men, as he had to turn and retreat and flee, the way that crowd chased him without any regard for lawlessness. Now, I was in Washington in 1983 for the March on Washington. I was in Washington 1993 for the March on Washington. I was in Washington in 1995 for the Million Man March. And again, when we gather in Washington, great, in spite of all of the controversy that was created, is the Million Man March going to be safe? What's going to happen? People stayed home. But we always are focused on being lawful. But to see that group yesterday with no regard for the law, and worse, no regard for penalty. Just again a glaring example of how differently power is exercised among the white citizenry and the black citizenry of this country. You would have thought yesterday that you were dealing with a Boston Tea Party situation. The impunity in which they approached the government and disregarded the law was stunning in 2020.
Yeah, I think that, you know, a couple of things in terms of, you know, as we look at what occurred yesterday, and, you know, I was listening to Mayor Baraka do his live today, and he was naming names, right? Because he said that you know, these law enforcement agencies are claiming that they can't find some of these people, you know. And this is absolutely amazing that, you know, because some of these people faces are in broad daylight, sitting in chairs, walking out the building, you know, with podiums and you know, and breaking doors and literally, you know, hanging off of buildings and those things and not
posting it.
And they were streaming from their personal social media account. So how you can't find them? Right. They go live from their actual social media.
Right. So the mayor was naming names. So he was giving the names. He said, "Let me tell you who these people are, since y'all are claiming y'all can't find them." And he said Monique, he said some of these people are actually law enforcement and fire department people themselves. And
a state legislator,
and a legislator, right? Mm-hmm. You know, but some of these people are trying to take those postings down now because they now know people are looking for them. So now they're trying to take this stuff down. But here's the other thing, right? You know, even the elected officials, right, who you know were walking out, throwing up the, you know, the fist sign and egging them on and so forth. And these folks were busy committing crimes and breaking all types of laws. The other thing is that even in Giuliani and y'all in New York, y'all remember this. There was a time when you were coming up in New York, they had this saying called Giuliani time. Y'all remember that? And, and that was a signal to the police that they can just commit all kind of crimes. They ain't had to pay attention to no laws. Well, Giuliani has this new word that he gave to the rioters where he called it battle combat. Let's go do some battle combat. So they had code words that they were giving these people. What I don't understand is, though, that how come Giuliani and Holly and Cruz, how come these folks haven't been immediately disbarred? Because those kind of things are violations in terms of ethics when you have a law degree.
And
right?
Let me raise this. I'm gonna bring it back to the question of political prisoners, right? People do not realize that the last civil rights bill is called the H. Rap Brown bill, right? Who is in prison now, right? Anybody going across state lines with intent to incite violence or inciting violence or committing violence of that kind, of a so-called riotous kind, can go to prison for federal charges, right? I don't hear that nowhere in this dialogue where these white folks don't went, but and they were not all DC residents. They came from every corner of this country with intent on doing the mess that they did, and had there been any less resistance by those local police forces, who knows who else would have gotten hurt that was on the inside of that.
That's right.
I mean, that was a lynch mob.
Yeah.
We can't sugarcoat that. Meanwhile, we got folks in prison, been in prison almost 50 years from the kind of stuff for less.
But it was clear that these laws were for Black people, for the disenfranchised. And I'm glad that you mentioned Giuliani, Brother Ed, because actually, and I know Brother Conrad remembers this because he named the 90s, but back when David Dinkins was mayor in September of 1999,
that's right.
Giuliani, who was not mayor at this time, also led a mob to City Hall.
Absolutely.
Yes, he did.
Of police officers, of
Yes,
white
he did.
supremacists, right? To breach City Hall, saying that, David Dinkins is incompetent. They had brooms. They said he should be a janitor. He should be mopping City Hall. I mean, we have images of this. So this is a playbook that they've had, not just going back decades, that's decades ago, but really going back centuries. They know that these laws do not apply to them. And they know that these laws are to help to maintain their power, to maintain the status quo. And that's why they just move without even thought that something that applied to H. Rap Brown, Jamil Al-Amin, would apply to them today. Giuliani has done this before. Trump just took it on the national scale. And then he won the mayor's office, by the way.
That's right.
2 years
Absolutely.
after
That's right.
inciting a riot at City Hall.
Right.
Strong arming. That's right. That's right.
That's how they win power. So they were like, we're going to stick with it.
And in fact, they held people hostage, including the mayor of New York City that day. Again, one of the interesting things about yesterday, and police can investigate until the cows come home. So, 50 to 70 people have been arrested. Most of them have been arrested for violating a curfew and laws in the District of Columbia. Now, some of the more outspoken and bold people, like the man that sat on Nancy Pelosi's desk, the man that stood behind the podium, they have been arrested. And so I'm sure that Merrick Garland and the Justice Department will assign a whole squad to bring these people appropriately to justice, because again, you could not have a more blatant display of a disregard for the law. And I, to be quite honest with you, I am for the citizens of this country being outraged. And had they gone there and stood outside the Capitol and chanted at the top of their lungs and raised sand and whatever their objection was, I am a strong civil libertarian, and I'm a person that believes that just as we have the right to protest and raise our voices, but when you break windows, when you destroy property, when you break into offices, that is a criminal action. And so, that's where freedom of speech becomes violent political speech, and that's anarchy. And so I don't support that. I think it's counterproductive, and these people should justifiably be prosecuted, every one of them that they can find. But you know how the case usually is. They'll select one or two that they will largely symbolically prosecute. But if there were blacks involved, they would have an exhaustive search and get everybody. So we have to watch this. Now the Democrats control the Senate, the Congress, and the Justice Department. So there shouldn't be any problem with these prosecutions.
Reverend Tillard and Monifa. Just a quick question. We kind of asked, the question after, but is there anything that you can say at the moment that you looked at the TV and realized that this was going on? How did you feel? And in terms of Reverend Tillard in the classroom, has your students asked, and I think more so this generation has this may be the first time that they've seen something like this. They've seen the preparation when we're out protesting, but other people respond like this. So what was your feelings when you seen it on Wednesday, and have the young people in your community been asking you questions and things of that sort?
Well, I try to be very, very cautious in condemning exercises of outrage by the citizens. We as a people have had in places like Newark, in places like Washington, D.C., in Los Angeles, in Chicago, in Detroit, we have had spontaneous outpourings of rebellion, resistance Some say violence, some say mob rule. And so I think that in America, we want to have wide longitude and latitude for frustrated people. Martin Luther King said the riot is the voice of the unheard. So I want to always give balance, because my students, many of them participated in the protests for Black Lives Matter. Of course, those weren't violent protests, except those that did engage in violence and looting and Soho, et cetera, and other places. So, you know, for the most part, America has a tradition of people being outraged, pissed off, but we also have a tradition of law and order. And as Brother Zaire appropriately said, when Blacks did rise up, and when we have in the past, people paid a price. There are people still in prison, political prisoners, for taking strong positions. And justice, equal protection under the law, says that the same thing has to happen for those that participated yesterday. We have the technology. There are all kind of investigative means to identify people. But I don't think that we should present this as though this has never happened in the history of the United States. Never happened in the Capitol, and that's for certain. But it is a bold display. But it's not unprecedented when you look at American political activity, actions, and outrage on the part of the citizenry. And the other thing is, you know, their politics are different than mine. But let's face it, there are a lot of pissed off middle class, working class, and poor white people in this country. And one of the challenges of the Biden administration is going to have to be, if he says he's going to be a president for all people, he's got to figure out how to address that resentment. Now, of course, Trump stoked it. He exploited it. He rode to the presidency on that, using that anger. But it's there. It's palpable. And, you know, we saw a display of it just the other day.
But now, no, go ahead, Marie.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to say that we immediately thought about this summer. You know, I think Tamika is coming on, and then Rukia as well. But Rukia and I both were a part of the national coordinating forces for the Juneteenth mobilizations this summer. You know, and so when we were watching stuff unfold, you know, we're all on a text thread together. It was like, wow, right? Because when we had people, and, you know, it was in the millions in the street throughout the month of June, one of the first things that they did put down were these curfews. You know, never before, at least I have never remembered, it was curfew in New York. There was a curfew in DC, right? And so what it looked like when the curfew happened was that the police came in and they would actually kettle the people who were protesting and then beat us all up, right? And drag people away, throw them in jail.
That's right.
So when my kids were watching and they said, well, it's going to be a curfew in DC, you know, you're watching the news, and it was 6 o'clock and you see the police there and the folks there, and it was almost 7. And then the kids are like, well, when does the curfew happen? Because in their minds, the curfew is like what happened in the Bronx, right? The police came, they kettled people in 10 minutes before the curfew. And then when 8 o'clock hit, you can look at the video on Human Rights Watch, because they actually did a report specifically on the NYPD and how these curfews unraveled and then beat the crap out of people. So, you know, it was eye-opening, but also, you know, you asked how did children respond? You know, my kids for a little while, they were confused. They're like, so when are they doing this curfew thing? It's like, oh no, that's what they're doing now. How they're telling them, okay, get across the street, and, you know, it's a DC-wide curfew, but we just want you to cross the street from the Capitol. It's a much different picture.
So Monifa, did I hear you say that the cops were beating people up? Did I hear you say that?
Oh, yes. There were families, young people, there were moms had kids, they kettled them in. There's some video on Human Rights Watch from Mont Haven in the Bronx. That shows the precinct there deliberately cut off the march on 4 different sides before the curfew. waited to the curfew, and then, you know, the white shirts said, "Get them," and the police just wailed on folks. And so there's a lot of images on that throughout the media. And in fact, Center for Constitutional Rights and Legal Aid filed a case against the NYPD. And, you know, the curfew was lifted a few days later because the NYPD was just going crazy, running people over with vehicles.
That's right.
And so are these people being prosecuted now? These police officers for that, or
not a single one?
What? And you're saying there's video evidence of this?
That's right. I'm gonna drop the link in the conversation. There's video. There's a whole report.
It was no secret.
Wow. Wow.
Here's a piece that I wanted to get in though. That I don't want people to overlook is the timing of this. This was not just some spontaneous mob. This was happening while the certification of the election was taking place, and it was done deliberately, no matter the cost or price. And they think because of their privilege that there would be no significant cost or price to stop that certification from happening. That's what, and we can't lose sight of that. That's intent, and then it means a whole lot more in terms of responsibility and culpability for whatever that means, if somebody's going to be held accountable for the mess that they did.
They was yelling, "Our house, our house, our house." Yeah.
And let us remember, let us remember our ancestors that built it.
One of the things, Ed, you know, I hope we can get into, but you know, I'm a pastor. I have led many institutions. I've been elected to the chairmanship of nonprofits and student organizations. And, you know, as a leader, I always try to be balanced, to give leaders credit, because whenever you find yourself as the head of anything, it's a hard, difficult job. And so last time I ever talked to Sean Hannity, I cursed him out when he just refused to give President Obama any credit. You know, so I've tried to give the President of the United States every consideration. I've criticized him. I've tried to recognize and respect the office, even when I couldn't respect the man. But I'll tell you, in the last 2 months since November, President Donald Trump not only destroyed his presidency, which could end in the next before the next 13 days, but he's also destroyed his legacy, and he has, in many ways, did something that's even worse. You know, he was a political outsider. He came to the presidency. He was elected. He beat 17 political veterans. I always thought that the precedent that his election set would bode well for a progressive person who would emerge from our way of thinking that could ascend to the heights of the presidency. But he has in many ways destroyed and given the establishment hegemony once again over that coveted office, because he has shown himself to be a complete amateur, to have no concept of the importance of the presidency, the institutions. He tweeted today that he is not going to be at the inauguration. Biden said he agrees. That's the only thing he and Trump have ever agreed on. But it was just, you know, it's a shameful end to his presidency. And, you know, if there was ever any opportunity for his legacy to even be mixed, it has just completely been destroyed in these last 2 months. And yesterday, for the leader of the free world, for the leader of any institution to essentially turn its citizens on that institution is a failure of leadership that any high school principal, any pastor, any community board leader would just be pilloried for doing what he did. And in that regard, he deserves the calls for impeachment. He deserves the calls for those who are calling for the enactment of the 25th Amendment. I don't think any of those things will happen. remember, he got over 7 million votes, and there's still those 7 million people who are going to be angry. So it may not be in the best interest of the nation. Biden says he wants to be a president for the nation. We may need someone who can come in and try to bring folks together, but he certainly deserves everything that he's getting now. People are turning on him. He's really going to be a man without a country in the next 13 days. I don't know where he's going to live. He can't come back to New York, and I don't know if he can even go to Florida after yesterday.
But it's not just him though, right? I mean, we're talking about all of those folks that are with him who continue to perpetuate the lie, right? And particularly, you talk about Giuliani, you talk about all of the elected officials, but you talk about his daughter, Ivanka, who was planning to run for office, right? So all of these folks, had a vested interest in this lie continuing. And you got to think about it. This man was able to raise, I think, $200 million from those people. Those 74 million people that voted for him, they were able to raise over $200 million. And so I don't know if that money is going to be used for legal fees or if the money is going to be used to finance a campaign, or if it's going to be used to create his own independent media. We don't really know. I think that for us though, that I think we should be, yes, we can look at this, but I think what we've got to be doing is I think that as a community, right, we've got to look at this and we've got to say, well, what is it that we can learn from this? Because we all know that had this been Black Lives Matter or any Black organization or any Black protest on this level, we would not have gotten that far. We know that the justice in this country is one for white folk and one for Black folk. So we know that. But now we've got to talk about, okay, so we see this level of injustice. Now, what are we going to do? Because we know that these folks are not going to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. We know that some of these folks aren't going to be disbarred. We know that some of these folks aren't going to resign, aren't going to leave the white. We already know white folk ain't going to meet out the same level of justice. You can just look at, I've been looking at Fox News, and it's almost like Fox News saw two different things occur, right? I mean, you're looking at them talk, and you're saying, well, what did they see? I mean, because they're acting like this didn't even happen. They're trying to move past it. And so if we know that as Black folk, I think we've got to begin to have a different level of conversation. Because I think Joy Reid said it when I was watching her show. I think it was yesterday or Wednesday when this happened. And, and the truth is, I think that, the one thing Black folk know in America is we know that white folk can justify their criminality. Black folk, we can't justify criminality, even if we do it and we're trying to protect our own lives, right? Think about the brother that was in New York who was trying to protect his family life when these white folks came on his lawn and he used his weapon to protect his home. You remember when that happened, Brother
John White, John White, Long Island.
Yeah, he didn't even have a right to protect his own life and his own family, and he went to jail for that.
And that was a mob. That's right. Similar dynamics. That's right.
So, one of the things I would like to ask, because this segment is called The Vote, and one of the things that has been said for the last 4 years, once 45 was voted into office, all throughout it's been consistent that voting has consequences and not voting has consequences. So in spirit of your segment being called The Vote, and you kind of said it, Reverend Tiller, that he brought out those persons who were maybe felt unheard, not, that the previous administration was not speaking to their concerns. But voting has consequences and not voting has consequences. And what Stacey Abrams was able to do, which caused which is going to cause a different change that we're going to see. But one of the things that I heard Reverend Warnock say, that when he was out in those rural areas of Georgia, that people said we don't get people from the federal level to come out here and knock on doors. So this whole thing of staying engaged with the voter, can you just speak to a little bit about that and the consequences of not doing so?
Yeah, well, let me just say, first of all, Stacey Abrams is just a political genius. I don't need to say that because we all know that. But I think when the history is written, what she's done in Georgia, I know Sister Bandele knows about the people moving to particular states and counties in Georgia. And, you know, with the large influx, I'm a New York minister, and I've lost people for 30 years to Georgia. And, you know, the tremendous numbers of Blacks that are pouring into that state, that are going outside of Fulton County, outside of DeKalb County, into the various counties throughout the state. And then Stacey Abrams organizing that, narrowly missing the governor's mansion, not giving up, going to work, changing the laws, changing the legislature, getting the legislature to change the laws, which actually worked in the Democrats' favor, is a marvel, and political scientists will study her and what she did in Georgia. Raphael Warnock, my brother, out of Abyssinian Baptist Church, we're both ordained ministers of Abyssinia. We went to Union Theological Seminary together. So, you know, it's an amazing testimony to what we can do. In spite of all the bad news, again, when we are engaged, as Reverend Jesse Jackson always says, when we fight, we win. And so Georgia is a tremendous example of what it means to stay vigilant. You know, it was 2 months from the election, and, you know, people didn't know whether they'd be able to keep the attention of the Black community and keep young people focused, and showing you that with political organization, you can do that. And not only did they defeat Donald Trump in Georgia, but also 2 months later came back and elected 2 U.S. senators, which really just changed the whole dynamics of the government going forward. So that's an amazing testimony. So it just shows us when we do what we're supposed to do, the system actually can work in our favor, even though we see large areas that need to be changed. We put Biden in office. What do we do to get these people prosecuted? Bring pressure upon the Justice Department and remind Biden throughout these next 4 years that they have a duty to exercise the law with equal protection under the law. One standard.
I want to jump on that piece about 2020 is really the year of the Black voter. You know, there's so much that will be said about the pandemic this year. Absolutely, this is the movement for Black Lives year, but also Black voters, the Black vote basically turned the trajectory, the political trajectory, not just of the country, but of the entire planet, right? Part of what was unseen is that while we were doing mobilizations all summer, there was also voter registration, voter education. What happened in November wasn't just that we turned out the Black base. People were brought into civic engagement who were not engaged before. And it wasn't just in Georgia. It was in Philadelphia. It was in Pittsburgh.
Right.
You know, it was all over. It was in Detroit, right? It was really going down and saying, you know, we're out here in the streets. We're saying defund the police. We want to reimagine what public safety looks like for us and for our children. And in order to do that, we have to vote in our targets, right? We have to make sure we put people in office that we can start to move the needle with. And that resonated with people, you know, and Stacey Abrams, who is my Spelman sister, is a genius, as Brother Conrad said. You also had like dozens of Black women leaders on the ground in Georgia. Latasha Brown and Cliff Albright, who run Black Voters Matter, which is a part of the Movement for Black Lives. They're one of the 100 organizations that are in our coalition. Knocked millions of doors, took buses to every little crevice of the state and said, we can bring out our folks and we can shift the political trajectory of the planet. And so the Black vote is so critical, and it's just really an insult. It's actually a slap in the face when then people turn around and do things like attack defund, or blame the movement for the loss of congressional seats in districts where Black people don't even live. It's almost like we're supposed to both win the day and also help you when you're running a poor campaign. So, I can't give enough props, to our folks, both nationally and on the ground. It was a lot of work. You don't just change people who didn't vote in 2016, and some of which who didn't even vote in 2012 or 2008, turned out new voters, not just young, but middle-aged and old, who were inspired by the movement at the time.
And Monifa, I just want to say real quick, you pissed people off. I asked you at the last show, when you said the term defund the police, did you do that on purpose? And the sister that was just on, she so eloquently defined what defund the police was. But can you just tell us a little bit about how purposeful you were? And the appreciation is not going to be felt for, it seems like, forever, because people are still pissed off at that term, defund the police.
They're so pissed off. And you know what? 6 years ago, when we first said Black Lives Matter, they hated that. And I'm not just talking about white people. Like, white people, yes, were like, all lives matter. But you had our traditional white community were saying, you should say Black Lives Matter too. Or, what you're trying to say is great, but the slogan is divisive. It's bad. Now Black Lives Matter is painted on a street somewhere in every major city in America, right? And so one is that we actually have to push the envelope, right? People have to be uncomfortable in order to have the conversation that needs to be had.
That's right.
But
that's right.
Absolutely. My sister was on point. We're talking about a invest, divest model. And we intentionally called it defund the police, right? Because we wanted you to open your eyes and be like, what? You know what I'm saying? Like, they're going to speak truth to power. That's right. When you defund schools, when you defund mental health, when you defund affordable housing, when you defund access to high quality food, you know what I'm saying? And then you increase and you have these bloated police budgets, that means our communities are not safe, right? And so when we say defund the police, we mean take those resources from, for example, in New York City, Brother Conrad knows this, the NYPD has a $6 billion with a B billion a year budget. We're saying take that money and give us our mental health services back. Take that money and take police out of schools and put nurses and counselors and therapists in our schools. So it's really about investing in what we know makes our community safe and divesting from really, I guess, a concept that was born out of Hollywood, because a lot of police propaganda has blown up over the past 50 years. You have people in our community that think, just like on Law and Order, there's some cops at the local precinct that are like solving extremely violent and complicated crimes every episode. That's not what's happening. There's a lot of waste. There's a lot of military equipment that will never be used. And at the same time, if I need to call someone for the sister who lives across the street from me, who regularly has a mental health episode, I can't get anyone. Her family can't get anyone for her. Daniel Prude, Walter Wallace, here in New York City, Muhammad Ba. These are all people whose families called 911 because they wanted care. And instead, they got the police who came and killed them.
That's right.
Let's not forget about Kyle Coppin, who was killed holding a hairbrush. So I agree wholeheartedly with what Sister Bandelli said. It's very, very important and extremely, extremely powerful. And that's why these battles or the fault lines, at least one of them that she just explained, that's why I hope we don't fall for the okie doke of spending any more time talking about Trump. I always felt the Democrats were part of what they were doing was trying to alarm the Black community to talking about Trump is not going to leave office. And as I've said before, Trump found out that the U.S. government and the co-equal branches of government and the checks and balances are far stronger than he would ever be. He's going to be gone in 13 days. And in my view, it would be a great mistake to spend any more time. Let the historians talk about his legacy, what it means, what it doesn't mean. We need to turn our attention to Biden. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. We put him in office. He wanted to be president. And so it's no longer about Trump. He's gone. Now, because these battles that Monifa just talked about, they're going to have to be fought now. It's going to be all Democrats fighting. It's not going to be about Trump. It's not going to be about Mitch McConnell. Democrats control all three branches, or at least the two branches of government, the executive and the legislative. And there's going to be blood. There's going to have, figuratively, let me say that in light of what's going on. People like Bernie Sanders did not get into the cabinet. Many of the Congressional Black Caucus elected officials do not support the concept of defund the police. So, you know, we have some serious business ahead of us. And so I hope that we don't go for the okie doke. Because the longer we talk about Trump after he's gone, the more we're not talking about the person where the power the power is in his hands now. That's Joe Biden.
And
we got
why,
4 cabinet picks, 4 or 5, and HUD, which, you know, so we got some work to do.
Did we talk make sure their power, I just wanted to say, just as a follow-up, doesn't end with doing something about state violence. You know, we live in a city where the Democratic Party controls the mayor's office, the city council, the state legislature, but what they won't control is the NYPD. They won't control the police. And so we have to say enough is enough. We will not have these BS do nothing laws that you want to pass. You have to completely reimagine these systems so that our people can stop dying. And I agree 100%. We fought against and voted against Trump, and now we have to organize. Now Biden is an organizing target. The fight isn't over. In fact, we have to double down on the progressive policies that we know our communities need, because we see it in New York City. They'll get comfortable and say, well, we won, and we'll do all these other things, but we won't challenge the police.
Well,
and that's go ahead, Ed,
we're going into what that final question is, right? And in our last 8 minutes, you know, there it is, right? So now that, you know, all of that work has been done, Monifa, that you just talked about, right? All that work. Now, what is it that we get, right? So now, what is it that Black folk want, and what is it that we get? Because I've heard from some brothers in the progressive Black community say that, you know, we ought to immediately move, you know, because even Dr. Small said this when he was on the show last week. He said, you know, we should move to putting together a bill immediately to present to the Congressional Black Caucus. He said this to the congressman: change the name from reparations and call it something else and put it before your boy Biden, right? Because if Black folk ever going to get an opportunity to move that forward, it has to happen now, because Biden wouldn't be where he is, and the Senate and the Congress wouldn't be where they are if it were not for Black vote. That's right. In regards to Stacey Abrams. And so and even in that, Sister Pendelli, the question is that what is it, you know, because none of us can deny that the Democratic Party not only owed Black folks something, but they damn sure owe Stacey Abrams something.
And she got, so far, she hasn't gotten an appointment.
That's what I'm saying.
So.
They owe her.
I think she, I don't know. I think Stacey is being very strategic. So I'm sure she's been
Yeah, and I agree. And, you know, like I said, Stacey, Latasha Brown, the whole crew. But what they do get met with, and we've seen it, criticism. You know, it's like, yay on this end, but, you know, you're just a little too Black always. You're just a little too radical. We need you to come in. And if we don't get what we want now, like if the Congressional Black Caucus misses this opportunity now to really put it to Biden to get some strong demands, like you said, reparations. We didn't even call our bill, our defund bill is not called defund. It's called Breathe. It's called the Breathe Act, right?
That's
You know,
right.
so it's just like if we don't really put it to them right now, we will miss this opportunity. This window will close. And I think as much as like Brother Conrad was talking about what Obama was and wasn't able to do, you know, was limited and it's up for debate. But there were definitely opportunities missed, right? During that window when you have the White House and the Congress to do something about mass incarceration and the mass criminalization of Black people, and it didn't happen. And so now this is like another bite at the apple. And we've created the conditions in the streets. That happened all last year. You know what the people want. So now it's time for Capitol Hill to enact what the people want.
Right. And that's my point, right? We've got to be organized as a group of people, as Dr. Small said when he was, you know, because he was laying this out to the congressman last week. You know, one of the things he told the congressman was he told him to stop using this term Black and brown people, right? Because when you say Black and brown, you know, they're going to make sure that everybody else get what they want on the table, and Black folk are going to get what's last, and those brown people didn't do as much work as those Black folk.
Always last.
Right? And so that's why he was saying that, you know, he was telling, he said he hoped the Congressional Black Caucus would do something for Black people this time around, and because they now have, you know, control of the House and the Senate. And Brother Conrad, I thought you were going to respond when Sister Bendelli was using the term, you know, defund the police, like you told me when you said that brother from South Carolina said, when you got to explain defund the police, that's when you lose it, right? And
well, yeah, I mean, see, here's the thing, you know, there's difference between campaigning and governing. Okay, so what the Georgia election showed was that, you know, the community turned out in great numbers. The challenge is going to be, whether you call it defund the police, reinvestment, or whatever, now that the Democrats have the levers of power, you know, you're not campaigning to a national audience. So a person in South Carolina, a person in some of the more red counties or more conservative areas in the country, yes, they would have difficulty, as many of them did in those areas. But now that the Democrats hold the power, so it's a different kind of conversation now, because the president in the executive branch can set the tone. Congress can debate, put before the House and the Senate these bills and pass them. And so, you know, it's a different kind of conversation when you hold the White House, the Senate, and the Congress. So a lot more is possible. But again, you got to keep in mind, as Monifa said, generally speaking, the party in power only gets the first 2 years. And generally speaking, the electorate returns the Congress back to the party that's out of power. So Biden's got some difficult work. He's got to, at one point, bring the country together and govern, at least appearing to be moderate and bringing folks together. And he's got to satisfy legitimate outrage on the part of those that put him in office to bring about some of these clearly articulated things, prison reform, police reform, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it is an interesting time. That's why I'm saying now it's a waste of time to talk about Trump, because the battlefield is about to move internal now. Believe me, you're going to get Black congressmen are going to be sent out to do the bidding of the more conservative elements of Biden's cabinet. All of his close appointments are conservative white men. So believe you me, when you start.
Yeah, but listen, we got a long game. It was a long game that put Trump in office, and we have a long game. And part of the long game is primarium. Okay, like the increased squad, the new members to the squad, Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman. These are not people that beat out Republicans. They primary for
Machine
old
Democrats.
guard Democrats.
Right.
And so this is the movement also putting the CBC and the rest of Congress on notice that we are building a pipeline of folks who are going to be accountable to the communities that they come from.
Well, and that's an important point, because I guarantee when you talk about people like Greg Meeks, when you talk about others in Congress, they are going to be the ones that are going to be the ones opposing some of this stuff. And so that is, to me, where our energy should shift. You know, as I've said before, politics requires agile intellect and a military discipline to sort of pivot. You know, Trump is gone into obscurity after these next 13 days. We got bigger fish to fry, and the battle now is in the House.
Real quick, Reverend Tiller, you got it.
Hey, Donald, let me just say this.
Okay.
And then you can say it. You know what I'm reminded of, though, Sister Bendelli and Brother Conrad? I remember me and Mayor Baraka was having this conversation. And we were talking about in the 60s, and he was saying that you know, Dr. King had an issue with Kwame Ture using the term Black Power, right? And
Black Power, exactly.
Yeah, and he wouldn't get behind Black Power because he said that white folks, when they heard that, they would just get nervous. You know what I mean? This Black Power, and so I think the intelligent way that Sister Bendelli is using this Breathe Act, but it's all the same thing. I wish Tamika had gotten on the show tonight, because Tamika is saying the hell with that. She's saying defund the damn police, right? Mm-hmm. She refused to back that up. But I get it, right? I think if we gonna make a move, Sister Bendelli, we got to make that move now, right?
That's right.
Right? We want those bills passed, because Hakeem Mabuti told us 2 weeks ago when he was on with Mayor Baraka. He told us, he said that if Biden win those 2 seats, he said immediately, right? John, I don't know if John's listening, but he said immediately what Biden could do, he could give relief to Black college students. He don't need the Senate. He don't need the Congress. But he said if he get him, he said all he got to do is sign an executive order and remove college debt from Black college students, not students of color, but Black college students' life, and give them some freedom.
Yeah, and so see, let me say lastly, you know, on that point, you know, Dr. King, I love Dr. King, and one of the reasons why I love him is that, you know, he came slowly to a lot of positions. I mean, you know, he came slowly to the Vietnam question. He came slowly to the question of Black Power. But the great thing about him was he kept engagement with people like Stokely, Kwame Ture. Right. He kept engagement with young people on his staff, Bevel, and so he did come to that position. I know that some of our CBC electeds, you know, they're coming slow. Now, some of them are cynical, and they know what these things mean, and they're only interested in their rise to power. But we've got to differentiate those from those who just don't understand, and again, work toward unity without uniformity, but also putting forth that Black agenda. I think that's important what you were saying, Ed, that Black agenda, and understand that it's okay. You need a Black political agenda in America. We can involve in coalitions, all that, that's fine, but that's secondary to first having an agenda. And that's where these conversations will take place.
And you know, when we presented the Breathe Act to the CBC, and it was a large number, this was at the end of the summer. They were
Monifa, I just want to, Monifa, can you just respond to that? Can you just respond to that? It was in the background while you're talking. I just want to make sure you respond to it, so that, because they can't see. Okay.
Oh, they can't see the comment. Yeah, they were open to it. They want to dream big. They want to be able to, the conditions to be created so that they can leave a legacy of change, like have real impact. So I agree 100% with Brother Conrad. You know, they are growing, and we were actually surprised. We thought we were going to get a whole lot of pushback. We really didn't get any pushback. People like, what you're asking for is exactly what should happen. And there were some people who just think it's not possible. And then there were some who's like, let's put our heads together and figure out how we can do this. And a question was asked about how can defunding the police then put money into the school system, because the police budgets are local and the money that comes to the schools are through the states. And so my response was that those systems were legislated. Right? The way that tax dollars flow to schools and the way that police budgets are funded are created through state and local bills. And just like that was legislated, we can legislate another structure. We have to really just like be willing to step outside of the box. We put together model state BREATHE Acts in Illinois. A state BREATHE Act was just introduced, and it talks about on a state level, not only helping cities to shrink their police budgets, but to incentivize them to do so through saying, we'll increase the money that goes to your schools. And that's also the concept in the federal BREATHE Act, is saying, listen, if you can figure out a way to shrink your prison population, if you can figure out how to shrink the head count of your police forces and build up alternative public safety systems, we'll fund those things. We'll give more grants to schools. So there's ways to legislate these things. We don't have to get trapped in what the systems are now.
I was gonna just to add on to your point, when we're talking about like being creative, when people wanted charter schools, they were creative with funding, and they were able to defund public schools to put a lot of money into charter schools, right? They came up with a formula. They did all that stuff on the state level in order to do that. So I agree. I agree with the point that was made before, that the way things are funded because we do it. It's like we made up those rules. We can change those rules, right? Like
made up rules. We were talking about holidays. People say Kwanzaa's made up. Every holiday's made up. You know, it's almost like Black people are the only ones that can't like create a new practice. You know, we're trying to figure out how to reform the current practice so that it fits our needs. But we can do just like other folks and say, forget that practice. We're going to build something else from the ground up. And yeah, it requires collective imagination. I agree, Jonathan.
And Monifa, I know we're closing, and I don't know if you guys can answer. I wanted to know, how do you guys feel about the appointments in the cabinet thus far, particularly the Attorney General, the education appointment, but also the BREATHE Act? We've been putting it up. How can people help with the BREATHE Act as it begins to move through legislation, the process to be legislated?
Yes, if they go to their website, breatheact.org, you can actually sign on to be a community co-sponsor. And when you do that, your email goes in the system. And so when it comes time for our bill to be introduced and we need people to call their congressional representatives and email them like crazy saying we want it, you'll already be teed up to do that. So that's what we need people to do now. We have hundreds of thousands of people who signed on to be community co-sponsors, and we're going to push, that was from pushing out this summer. We're going to push it out again. And then that way you will be lobbying for this bill. That's one way that you can. And what was the first part of the question? I forgot when I was answering that one.
And just real quickly in 30 seconds, how do you feel about Merrick Garland and education?
Oh, yeah. I'm glad I remembered that. You know, I'm not thrilled about Merrick Garland. I'm definitely going to follow up with Brother Conrad, because he was saying he thinks he can get the job done. I think that the two women who are underneath Garland, Kristen Clark and Vanita, them would have been excellent attorney generals. I would have been dancing around my house. I'm not as thrilled about Merrick Garland.
Yep. Well, let me say, I did not say I'm confident he can get it done. I don't know whether he can or not, but I'm saying that's the stress point for the pressure now that he has the office. So I just want to clarify. You know,
and I'm happy about Deb Haaland.
What's that?
I said I'm excited about Deb Haaland, the first Indigenous woman who's head of the Interior, Secretary of Interior.
Yeah, and let me just say, you know, I had advocated and believed that the unique role that the Black community played in not only giving Joe Biden, handing him the presidency, but also handing him the Senate, we should have 50% of the cabinet positions. We only got 4 cabinet positions. We've got HUD, we've got EPA, we got, you know, a military cabinet position. And so, you know, UN ambassador, which we had under Carter. So again, these kind of stereotypical places for Blacks to get appointments is very disappointing. Biden's chief of staff, all those folks are people he doesn't have a diverse a cabinet directly around him. And so I am happy. Kirsten Clark was an undergraduate at Harvard when I was at the Divinity School. She was a fantastic young lady then, and she's a seasoned woman now. And so her work has been extraordinary. So there's some bright spots, but again, I urge Black people not to start yelling Jubilee and as though chickens and hams, etc., are going to fall out of the sky. Now we've got to remain vigilant, and the same energy we put on Trump, we got to put it on Biden now to make sure that he continues to start and then continue to meet the needs of our community. Because if we don't, the squeaky wheel gets the oil in politics and in life.
Well, Reverend Tiller, we expect Senator Schumer to be your next guest when you come back, sir.
Oh, Lord. Okay.
Well, listen, one of the things that Amiri talked about, he talked about creating structures, right? So we need to take these 2 years, and Bendelli talk about primarying people, folks. Now that we know we can organize the way that we've organized in this way, we ought to put pressure like hell on the Biden administration, but we ought to be putting together a structure to develop a Black political agenda, right? And that means that, no matter what the hell they do, right, we need to keep doing something for ourselves. Because if Stacey Abrams organized all those brothers and sisters the way he did down in Georgia, we can duplicate that model all over the country. And remember, Amiri told us before he died, Sister Bendelli, he told us, and you remember this, John, he came to the studio, Brother Conrad, and he said there are 27 states in America where Black people populate. And he said in those 27 states, right, is cities. And he said that's where you're going to find our people. But he said if you organize the way Stacey Abrams organized, he said you can take over all of those state governments, right? And you can change the conditions of your people locally. And that's what's happening in the city of Newark under Mayor Baraka. He took $60 million away from the police here in Newark. And what he did, Sister Bendelli and Brother Conrad, he took that money and put it together and put all the local organizations together and began to fund those organizations with that money he took from the police.
And that goes right into the
segue, right on.
And that goes right into the next segment that we're going to talk about. So, like when we have Keisha Uri, who's backstage right now, and we're getting ready to bring her on for this. So Ed, you were.
Yeah, Sister Bendelli, Brother Conrad, we thank y'all so much for coming.
God bless. Peace.
All right, and Mitty did hit me up. I spoke to Tamika. I did speak to all of them. They were supposed to be on with y'all, but we thank y'all for coming on during the first vote this year. And look forward
an exciting one too. An exciting one too. You got to talk about the white riots. I like that.
Yes, we did.
White riots at 21.
It's like the 1800s all over again.
No, but yeah, it sounds like it. It sounds like it. All right.
That's what we're gonna call it, Jonathan. That's what that's what the historians are gonna call it. The white riots.
The white riots of 2021. Right. So thank you.
Sister Keisha. Hey there, beautiful.
Hey.
What's up,
Keisha?
You're muted, sweetie cakes. There you go.
Happy New Year, everybody. Hello,
Happy
Donna and Jonathan and Alma. How are you?
Good.
I feel like cheering for Keisha. Keisha's in the building.
Well, true. You're like one of the hardest working women. You speak all over the country. You are like moving in all these different directions inside of the administration. Like, I mean, you're doing certain things with social work. Then you were doing the Shawnee Center, and now the Office of Violence Prevention. It seems like anything that deals with public health, violence, and the ways in which we are trying to look at public health differently. It seems like Keisha, you're all over it.
And what I would like to say is what you're teaching us most by example is even though you're all over, stepping back and taking some me time. Keisha, like She shut down. So I'm very thankful to see that you're doing that and setting examples. Let us know. Self-care is just like, she'll put on that self-care phone real quick. So thank you for doing that.
That's true. She's like, I'm not here. I'm in Florida. I'm good. You can't reach me. That's necessary.
That is an important subtext question for real. It really is.
So thank you.
I mean, I have to, because I take in so much. It's so much, you know, that's happening and going on all the time. And so the self-care is super important in order for us to rejuvenate and replenish, because we give so much of ourselves that we have to have some time for ourselves, and we have to, you know, take that moment, even if it's just a day, a couple hours, because I'm constantly 2 phones going all the time, texting all day long, on my way, you know, normally in the car somewhere. So it's certainly important to do self-care, and I try to do it as much as I can. It's my way of checking out, if you will. Principal Kafele, I see you. I love you, and definitely I walk in his footsteps. He's always all over the place. So, you know, those people who are always working and always, you know, educating and teaching the people, it makes it hard for you to be on the sidelines. And when you come up in a certain, you know, type of training, you don't get to be on the sideline.
Right.
And you know what, as you start talking about what you do, I just want to add that my mother was a social worker teacher. And it was always a fear of her, you know, even though I didn't do it indirectly, but she was always concerned as a social worker to do that work, that you always want to save the world and you're unable. And it's very, and it breaks your heart doing that work, she used to always say.
It is. Social work is a calling. And for those of us who are passionate about this work and who's always boots on the grounds, it just becomes a part of who you are. And it's entrenched. It's just, you know, it's hard work, it's thankless work. And, you know, shout out to all the social workers out there who, you know, are trained, but also naturally, you know, just social workers trying to help intervene and make the social ills of the world just better and help people be able to navigate through those tough things or ways for them to cope. Social workers are always the people that you call when nobody else knows what to do. We're going to call the social worker and they're going to figure it out. Right? They're the problem solvers of the world. They're the ones who make sense of things. Whether it's a crisis or not, social workers are the ones in the world who take care of things and figure out things.
So teachers make the best organizers too. I'm always trying to recruit from their ranks.
Absolutely. And so we're here. We've got you here. And we know that you're head of the Office of Violence Prevention in Newark. What is that? How did it come about? What is the Office of Violence Prevention? And what does that have to do with like this term that people keep talking about, defund the police?
So the Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery for the city of Newark came about probably about 6 months ago. Mayor Baraka signed the ordinance and put into place that we was opening the Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery by defunding the police. And I know that that's, you know, a lot of buzz and nationally people are, you know, chanting and screaming, defund the police. But our work has been on the grounds for about the past 12 to 15 years, you know, our activism work. And we had demands around that. And one of our demands was, or not even a demand, but one of the things in terms of some suggestions of what we should do was an Office of Violence Prevention. And so the mayor, you know, put that into place as a result of the climate that we're in, where, you know, police reform is huge and police brutality cases. And so we know that police and law enforcement has the biggest budget probably in every city. And so we have a public safety department in the city of Newark, which includes the fire department and the Office of Emergency Management. And so what we did was we took 5% of the public safety budget, overall budget, and we are reallocating that money for violence prevention programs. And so what that looks like for us in the city of Newark, which is groundbreaking and game changing, is that we were given the first precinct of the police department, where the police are going to be moving out of that building, and we're going to use that building for violence prevention intervention. There's going to be a museum in that building to document the history of policing from the 67 rebellion coming forward, to look at some of the changes and some of the milestones that we've made coming forward from 67 to now, that we have a whole violence prevention program inside of a police precinct, where, you know, policing has been seen differently. And now we're working in tandem, collaboratively and in partnership, and side by side with law enforcement. So what that means is that public safety and the Office of Violence Prevention, in terms of public safety, the Office of Violence Prevention is community-based public safety strategies, where we are a complement to law enforcement, where law enforcement doesn't have to be called out for every incident, where we can have social workers and outreach workers and case workers, and specialists that can intervene and respond to several of the calls that the community, and several of the issues that the community may have doesn't always include law enforcement. And so we're going to be right at the middle of that. And so the Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery budget is going to be approximately $11.5 million. And we're going to be a clearinghouse for community-based organizations who are already doing this work. We have 16 different organizations in the community, and partners who already are doing trauma recovery work, who are doing early intervention work, art therapy, mentoring, you know, all sorts of programming, and many of them don't have funding. And so the Office of Violence Prevention is going to be a clearinghouse for them to be able to get funding that they weren't traditionally able to get, but we're going to also be holding them accountable. So this is about accountability as well.
So when you're talking about these community organizations that are a part of it, you mentioned some work that they did. I think that the first thing you said was trauma recovery. Like, what were some of the things? You talked about trauma recovery. You talked about certain things that community organizations do. What are some of those things that are necessary, that need to be done, that are being done on the ground level that you mentioned? Can you break those down for us?
Okay, so under the Office of Violence Prevention, we're bringing essentially domestic violence, sexual assault, and community violence under one umbrella. And so under there, we have the Brick City Peace Collective. And the Brick City Peace Collective is managed by Dawn Haynes, where we are, again, that's where the 16 community-based organizations are doing collective work. And so some of that is...
We just had Dawn on that.
Say it again?
Yeah, we just had Dawn on a couple of weeks ago to deal with that.
Right. And so some of those things that we have, My Brother's Keeper, that falls under the umbrella, where they provide, you know, mentorship. We have Equal Justice USA, who's providing training and technical support, and strategic planning assistance. We have My Sister's Keeper. We have Newark Community Solutions, Newark Community Street Team, Newark Anti-Violence Coalition, the hospital-based violence intervention program at University Hospital. Beth Israel Hospital is at the table. MPD is at the table. Several organizations are at the table. And so they're providing the hub, right? The hub has a studio built inside of there where they're providing art therapy and music, and showing you that through the arts, people can heal. So this is about healing, right? So we know that trauma is happening, but how are we helping people to get on their healing journeys? What are we doing? We have counseling, grief support, homeless services, job development, substance abuse counseling, family intervention and family programs, women empowerment workshops, men's workshops, early intervention, where we're doing station house adjustment, where our young people are over incarcerated a lot of times, or over policed. And so we're making sure that there's some balance within that, where in other neighborhoods, they may just get a slap on the wrist and a ride home, you know, and talk to the parents. But here they're going to the youth house and they're going to go to jail and sit. So trying to get some equity.
So you're looking at the data in these cases as well, like the data is from some neighborhoods and the data from other neighborhoods. And you're like, hey, you're not treating these two communities the same way, even in the same city.
Absolutely. So this is all data driven. The mayor is certainly pushing data driven and data results. And so everything that we're doing is based on what the data says, although I'm boots on the ground and perception says something different a lot of times, trying to be balanced in that. Because we get the one-on-one accounts and we know what's happening on the grounds, but then the data can say something else, but really trying to be balanced in what both things are saying. But utilizing data for us to be able to make informed decisions about our strategies. We're working with Rutgers University, and they have a program that's helping us to look at the hot spots. And we're able to, based on the hot spots and where things are happening, we're able to strategically go in and put resources into those locations where the hot spots are based on mapping where incidents are happening.
And when you talk about putting resources in places, a lot of times people are like, oh, you look at mapping and that's where you put police officers. That's where you put cops, where there's hot spots. What do you mean by that? Like where you put resources?
We're not putting police officers in those hot spots. We're going to saturate those hot spots with violence intervention specialists, with credible messengers, with people who are from those neighborhoods and people who know those neighborhoods, who can talk to people who are from those neighborhoods. We're going into the businesses, right? And we're orienting the barbershop owners and the liquor store owners and the poppy store owners. And we are telling them, this is what the data says. Based on the data, this liquor store is right here. It's creating more crime in this area, or it's not creating it, but it's becoming a hot spot and people are gravitating here. So you may need to do something different. Looking at the places where it's not heavily lit, right? And we can inform PSE&G that we need more lights on these streets. So just doing things in a way that's not law enforcement based. Putting outreach workers, social workers, case managers, even doing, everything from food, clothing, food drives and clothing people and helping them, because we know that violence is, a result of poverty a lot of times. So really trying to find resources in terms of jobs, things that they can do to build their resumes and educating them and putting trainings and workshops into these places so that we can get them into school or into jobs. So those are some of the resources, but doing it from a community-based perspective, not law enforcement.
Jonathan, let me just jump in, because this is a dramatic example of that kind of intervention that's really important to this discussion that we need to appreciate, especially in light of what happened in the hot summer of 2020 and what just happened at the Capitol just a couple of days ago, right? And that is
the white riot,
right? Now, yeah, the white. That's right. Your friends, right?
Yeah. Right. When we
took to the streets for the uproar around George Floyd, et cetera, as that was going around the country, as that played out in Newark, right? We had a central demonstration that did one thing, and then we had some adventurers who broke away from the march and went to the first precinct on tearing that up.
And you're talking about the march that took place in the spring that had 12,000 people in it. And it was at the same time where cities were getting robbed.
That's the New York Times numbers. We'll take it, but it was probably more than that. But what I'm saying is, exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about. But it was our community folks, our interventionists, the street team, NAVC, all our folks who have been doing this work for a while that were on the case and were able to check that with the community's blessing, and the police knew that they were there so that they can fall back. Right?
Can you repeat that? What do you mean?
Right, and let the community folks do their work, and that prevented, which would have been a very serious setback to these very efforts that we were talking about, had they played out the way some of those knuckleheads wanted to play that out, and not being with the people when they were seeking to do that.
So that's a really interesting point. Kishiyuri, like the Office of Violence Prevention prevented violence in the case of protests. Like how did that even work on a citywide level? What was the day like for you?
So I would say on a citywide level, it wasn't even formal yet, right? The Office of Violence Prevention wasn't even a formal, office. But many of us who already work for the city, who are part of community-based organizations or are part of the community in a certain way, who are activists, who have relationship with our local city officials, we love this city. And so it was just kind of natural. There was some planning happening, you know, behind the scenes. We were having conversations up to midnight that night in terms of what to do and how to organize. There was organizing happening. People were called for certain reasons to say, listen, we can't allow people from other places to come into our community and tear it up. And we know that the people who are going to come are not from here. And so those conversations was happening behind the scenes between different organizations and knowing, okay, we need this organization to show up, and people who weren't a part of the organization, just individuals who love the city, who jumped out and said, no, this can't happen. And so it just almost happened just probably just organically, that people just came together from different walks. So even if we don't agree in the city council meeting today, we agree out in the streets that this is our community. And so that's what happened. And so it was, you know, wasn't necessarily protecting law enforcement, but it was, listen, we got it, right? Because we didn't want any arrests. We didn't want people to be fighting, all of those, you know, things that were negative. But the people really stepped forward. The community really came together in a way. Students came together from the colleges. They were organizing it the same day in the same, you know, the same way. Essex County College, NJIT, Rutgers students, really came together as well. And so you saw young people stepping up, and young people have always, you know, stepped up and taken the forefront. So it was organizing from the police to city officials to community activists to student organizers. So it just kind of came together all the way around. And when you have that, and if they can be collective at the table, then you can have better outcomes as well.
Keisha, I thought of the work that you did. I can remember coming to a seminar, training that you did about trauma. And I think it was the first one you did about trauma, and that we have all of this kind of reaction and response to what's going on in our community. But you went a step further to tell us to be aware of the trauma and by not responding to it. And I remember that whole day of that type of training that you taught us. So I mean, you've been out here doing this work for a while, and just what we're seeing is just continuing growth of what you have been doing for a great period of time. Because I want to say that first training on trauma had to be almost 10 years ago.
Were we at West Side? Was that at West Side? Or where was it?
Over by Muhammad Ali, the new Central. That was at Central, wasn't it?
Oh, at the precinct over there.
No, we were at the
Central High School. Okay.
Yeah.
So I've you know, led, you know, and we talk about trauma, and there's a trauma to trust training, right, that the police and law enforcement takes. Equal Justice USA facilitates it, but Newark Anti-Violence Coalition was a part of the listening and the visioning sessions for that in Westside High School up in the library when we started, when they wanted to bring it here. And we pulled together, you know, people who the community trusts and knows to say if this was good or not, and let them do a training with them to see if it was going to be effective. So, you know, the trauma recovery portion of the Office of Violence Prevention is a real place, because many of our people don't get mental health or social or emotional, you know, help after things happen. So if people are victimized in the community, people are being shot, stabbed, carjacked, different things are happening to them. But after things happen to them, then what? Where's the real help for them? And that's what we were noticing, that people can't get relocated out of the city, and there's no money for, you know, things to really help them, and they become trapped and have to stay in a location where, you know, their victimizer may be released back to, and because of financial reasons, they can't leave, and really trying to find ways to put some real things in place where we can help people in a real way. And so I want to respond to Ray Black, because I see his comment, and he said that this is all reactive. And for a long time, we've done reactive work, right? And instead of being proactive, and we got to be honest about that. All response, all reactive, and we know that it starts early. And if we can do some things earlier, then we can prevent them from happening versus having to intervene. And so he says, how about putting stuff like that in the schools? And a lot of that stuff can be prevented before they become adults. I don't hear leaders talking about education. That's where it starts. So a part of the Brick City Peace Collective, where the 16 different organizations come together, we have Newark Public Schools at the table, because we do understand that. So as part of the violence model, under the office, we have a early intervention piece where we are in the schools. And so right now, currently, I'm working with University High School, Shabazz. We're going to start with Weekway and also West Side, but then also younger people earlier than that. And as we talk to professionals, they say that you need to intervene almost in probably like the 3rd or 4th grade with them before they get to 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Most of the young people are doing things already by the time they're 11 and 12 years old. They're smoking, they're drinking, they are involved in robberies. I saw a case come across my desk recently. 11-year-old robbed a elderly woman, 78-year-old woman, with a gun, right? An 11-year-old. So they are indulging in maladaptive behaviors very early. They are smoking, drinking, robbing, shooting, carjacking, young. And the youth house is full of young killers, if you will. They're full of, young people who've already been engaged with law enforcement. And so we have to intervene earlier at the age of probably 8, 9, and 10, which is difficult, but we have to. And so I appreciate the comment, and we're working on ways to be able to intervene with them early because many of them are disengaged from school, and this COVID-19 just doesn't make it any better with the learning from at home. Many of them can't focus. Many of them don't have what they need in order to, focus. So we're up against a tremendous fight to engage young people in education, for them to be able to see themselves in education and why education is important. We have to now start to fight a little bit harder and get people in the schools who are willing to, do this fight with us, because it can't be traditional education. We know our young people don't do things traditionally. So we have to times 10 magnify how we engage our young people. And they have to be able to see themselves in education. They have to understand why education is important. For me, education was important for me to get me out so that I could have options and opportunities. And no one really explained that to me until I was older, right? Well, you just had to go to school because your mother said so. But now you don't, right? Because y'all said so, don't work no more. So we have to really be more intentional around how we engage and activate our young people so that they want to learn and not take and be a part of violence or any of the negative behaviors. But
Keisha, Dawn talked to us also. Dawn Haynes talked to. So the Board of Education is at the table with you as well. It's and one of the things you said that is multiple organizations, and Dawn, a board member, is also at the table. So it's all it's many people at the table, including the police and the public safety, who are discussing solutions for our community to undo some of the long-standing practices.
Yeah, they're at the table, but then we also, a lot of us don't understand how education works or the public education system works. And so I think that we have to, do a better job around how the systems work. And we are really always coming from a systems approach. And many of us don't understand systems. So I think that we should be more educated in how the public safety system works, how the school system works, especially since we had a change, right, from being under the state to now being, independent, if you will. What does that look like? What does that mean now? So a lot of us just need to understand how these systems can work together, but we need to understand how the systems work individually.
Let me say something if I can, and then I just want to add to that point, and it's a point I wanted to include in the last discussion too, but we can come back to that because it's going to be a long battle, and we got a lot of work to do. Right? Is that one of the things that we can also build on that we have on its hand? It also needs strength and needs resources. Is the Newark school system, and one of our main warriors on this front, Bashir Akinyele, is one of them. That's doing the work and bringing the whole question of an Amistad curriculum into the Newark school system, putting our history where it needs to be, teaching it the way it's supposed to be taught, dealing with the trauma dimensions that comes with our social reality as a consequence of our history, right? So we can help move our people forward, move our kids they'll have more that they need in terms of their background, right? From historical development, historical leadership, historical information, historical inspiration and example to deal with that, the pain and the trauma of historical trauma and their personal trauma. That's in the mix. And we need to build on all of those dimensions, and that particular dimension, which is state-based, right, needs to be, so I'm getting that. So, I mean, it's one thing to raise a question and to raise a concern, on the outside, like the brother's question, but I want that brother to see also that there's a place for him and folks like him to turn the volume up for support for those kind of paradigms that we have that need strength.
In one of the things that you talk about a lot, and Donna brought this out as well, is that for years, you, the Newark Anti-Violence Coalition, have been talking about trauma and the centrality of understanding trauma in order to deal with violence. Is it safe to say that that is like the organizing principle behind what you're doing with these defund programs and what you're talking about now in terms of a public health approach? Is the thought that the reason why we have violence is because we have unresolved trauma and that we need programs to understand that and target a lot of that unresolved trauma? I mean, am I oversimplifying it?
No, I wouldn't say oversimplifying it, but I think that it certainly is due to, unresolved trauma and not understanding behaviors of why things happen, right? Trauma, right? The thing most people who experience trauma, the response to people is, well, why? What happened? What is wrong with that person? Right? We always say, what's wrong with them? What's wrong with them? But we never ask what happened to them, right? And so if we can get to the root cause of what happened to them, many people experience trauma because of death, right? Many people experience loss, grief, and death, and they haven't had a chance to resolve it. And that's a huge one. Some of us have, some people have been violated, right? They've been robbed, stabbed, jumped, like something happened to them egregiously. Many, as we begin to talk, the sexual violence is major. And as Black people and in our neighborhoods and in our communities, we don't talk about sexual trauma. We don't talk about Uncle such and such touched that person. We don't talk about how they've been sexually assaulted by mommy's boyfriend. Or, we sweep this stuff under the rug, and then we have people, male and female, right? I'm listening to more men who are experiencing molestation. And they don't talk about it. Our community, we don't talk about things. And so as a result of us not talking about it, it becomes built up and, the body keeps the score, right? And then with that trauma, it either comes out in violent behavior or it comes out, internally. They hold it and keep it internally. And so they end up having physical effects, from holding in trauma. And so the effects are just tremendous. And that's domestic, that's sexual, and we have different types of trauma, right? We don't talk about our historical trauma, generational trauma that's been handed down since since those of us who've been brought over into slavery, right? That historical trauma is 400 and 500 years handed down, handed down, handed down, handed down. And we don't see it. We begin to normalize it as it's just our history. It's just what happened. And so we can't continue to normalize it. Now we have to do something about it, because if we don't begin to heal and start our healing journeys, then we'll just continue the cycle of violence. And when the victim becomes the perpetrator, and then the perpetrator becomes the victim, and you become both, right? And so how do we intervene in that? And once we notice it, then we got to start to really intervene. And so our young people are brought into this world, brought into, situations where they have to learn how to just be in it. And in houses where there's no heat, no electricity, they're in houses with no food, they're in houses being abused emotionally, sexually, all of these things. And we expect them to come to school and perform. They walk through neighborhoods where they see people get killed. They see robberies happen, and they see shootings happen, and they see people, selling drugs and using drugs right in front of them. And so we want them to perform in school after they walked all the way to school and saw 4 and 5 things happen, didn't eat anything, and we want them to perform. And so we really have to, really, really, really start to look at what happened, what's really going on beneath the behaviors. And once we begin to do that, then we'll be able to decrease, a lot of the incidents that are happening with people.
And so that really is the heart of when people talk about defund the police and they talk about the heart of the approach that we're having in Newark. It seems like the Office of Violence Prevention understands that violence is a public health issue, and that all of those and all of the programs that you talk about are ways to deal with specific elements of that violence at different age groups, in different social contexts. You're looking at how can we intervene with social workers and resources to be able to deal with the effects of trauma that's already happened, to prevent like the future trauma that can come from violence. Is that a way to, is that really what our policies are about in Newark?
You've been saying it for years.
Yeah, I mean, and because we have to be more aggressive in that, right? And so if we have students who we know are not engaged and not come to school, and we have these low percentage rates of attendance, then at what point do you, well, I'm not going to say at what point, but at this point, it's going to be me, Keisha saying, okay, let me get my outreach team together and we about to go knock on some doors to see what's going on, right? What's really happening. A lot of these students are not, performing or not showing up or not engaged for a reason. And no one really goes to check and see why. So if they miss 20 days out of 30 for the month, then what do we do? At what point do we not going to do? I know they have attendance officers and all of those things, and some of them may not be able to engage. But then you got to go and have other options of people who can engage with these young people, who can engage with the people from the community and the mothers and the fathers. And we have, such an increase in, incarceration and substance abuse and all of these things. And so we're not saying that programs is going to be the be all end all, but what I'm saying is that we have to have some options for people. We have to have access. They have to have access to mental health treatment, where they're not going to go to the hospital and go and talk to a psychiatrist and go to the crisis unit, because no one wants to be deemed crazy, right? But if someone like me shows up and say, hey, let's just have a conversation. Let's talk about what's going on. I notice certain kinds of patterns. Let's just talk about what's going on, right? People who are relatable, people who look like them, right? Because we think that mental health and emotional health are really for people who don't look like us. But we have to start to see ourselves in that. We have to start to normalize and know that mental health, physical health, emotional health, social health, financial health, all of these things are a part of your health. And it's not separated. They all intertwine. It's intersectionality. And so we have to start decompartmentalizing that stuff and saying this all makes up the whole person. So if I'm not financially healthy, and it's going to be hard for me to be emotionally healthy. And if I'm not emotionally healthy, it's going to be hard for me to be physically healthy, right? And so again,
you know what, Keisha? You know what? I just got a visual when you said that of the movie Lean on Me, and at the point where the young woman said to Joe Clark in the movie, my mother doesn't love me anymore. And then he got his assistant and they went to the house and they had a conversation, and the mother began to understand, of course I love her. And but it was that conversation that opened everything up. The mother had lost her job. And so to what you just said, let's go knock on the door. But that conversation and that scenario in the movie changed the dynamics because somebody knocked on the door and asked a specific and had a conversation.
Absolutely. And we have to have conversations and communicate. So communication is so effective. And sometimes we have to understand the nonverbals as well of what they're not saying. We have to be able to read in between of what's not being said. And so, this is all a part of the work. And I think that it's just important. I know that some of the schools have resources to help families. I know that some schools have helped families pay rent and get them food and all of those things. But I think that we have to do more of that from a community. These are the community schools that I know that do it, but all the schools should be community schools. And if it's public safety, we have to have an alternative for community-based public safety. And if we're doing public health, where's the community-based public health? Because the community has to be in the middle of everything that we do. We can't make decisions for them. We can't not include them. So anything that we have, the alternative is community-based. So for me, if we have public safety, we got community-based public safety. And that's for me, what I'm looking to do as a vision for the Office of Violence Prevention is to make sure that the community piece is at the heart of everything that I'm planning, strategizing, hiring, all of those aspects. So, you know, we also know that public safety and public health works together. It should be a marriage. So at the Shani Baraka Center, on one side is public safety. The police are on one side, but right on the other side, they can walk people right over. There's social services and there's resources for them right on the other side. And so they have to be hand in hand, that when we are, intervening in one place, we have to be able to give and substitute in another aspect as well, and fill in gaps. So that it's a holistic approach. And that's how we have to, look at it. We have programs out the wazoo, right? And so that's not what I want to do. I don't want to program people or put them in programs. I want to change the mindset and change the hearts and the spirits and the minds of our people. That's the goal. But the mayor said, this is not about decreasing crime and violence. This is about freedom, justice, and liberation. And once we understand what the mission is, then we can do this work from a real place. But if we think we're going to decrease crime and violence, that's not my mission. The mission is to get our people free. The mission is to get our people, liberated from the hands of white supremacy. That's the mission. And from there, once we understand who we are and know who we are, then the rest is history.
When you say that, when the programs that you're talking about, there are a lot of people who would say that when you said the police and the public safety element are two sides, you need both. There's some people who are like, when they say defund the police, they mean abolish the police.
Oh, absolutely. Some people do mean abolish completely, that they don't need police at all and that we can police ourselves. I understand that those people exist, those organizations exist, and some of those people have some strategies in terms of how that, can work. I don't think that we're at that place to completely abolish, but I know that there are some cities such as Camden and some other cities who dismantled and rebuilt. And so I think that it just depends on what we really are trying to do. If we defund them, defund means, are we trying to get rid of and abolish, or are we just trying to make some equity happen in terms of, you don't get to have $200 million and then the rest of us have none, right? And so we have to share. But if we feel like we don't need police at all, I don't think that we're at that place, because we have some people in our communities who feel like that's who they're going to call. So when something happens, they're calling 911 and they want to see the police show up because they trust that the police are supposed to protect and serve. They believe in that. And we have some of us who don't believe that at all, based on the history of policing and based on how policing came into existence.
So let me ask a question, John. So Keisha, so how much of this, we were talking earlier about, folks not really paying attention to the rules in Newark, particularly around this whole COVID thing, because the numbers are going up. And so some of these kids are going, because a lot of them live with Big Mama. And so when they go back home, they get Big Mama sick. And then once Big Mama gets sick and dies,
Big Mama,
right? Because they're not paying attention to the rules. So the question I've got is, because I remember talking, with Lauren about this, about the community schools that her and the mayor was doing at Central High School. How much of that concept, and I realize we're in COVID, so how much of this in terms of changing the condition of young people, particularly those young kids you talked about, who are 12 and 13, who are now in the youth house, how much of this is tied to funding, right? Being able to change this whole post-traumatic syndrome that we have about, ourselves, and about getting quality education, quality health care, quality mental care. How much of it is about funding?
Some people would venture to say all of it, but I would venture to say, some of it. I would say that the schools, and I'm not sure what the school budget is, but I would, but I know that there's been some cuts in terms of the education. But I would say I don't know. I don't know how much of it is tied to funding, because I don't know if the more money you have, the more, you know, you do the right thing with, right? So I can have all the money and I'm not doing, you know, what I need to do and what's right with it, then I'm going to continue to be in this cycle. So I would say that you have to have our folks like Principal Kafele and people who are real strong in terms of education, organizing systems, seeing what the real problems are and being able to, you know, get the right people in place. That's what I want to say. I want to say it's about the right people. Just because we have more funding, I don't think we have the right people in place that represents what that funding looks like. A lot of times we don't want to pay the people who are great to be able to come in and do what we need for them to do, whether that's training, consultant. We don't want to pay the right people because we don't value them the same way. So we bring in a person like a Principal Kafele or you know, our educators and our people who we know can turn and change some things around. You would pay him $100,000, but you're going to pay somebody else $200,000, or not see his value enough to even offer him to pay him, right? Because you want him to come in for free, and he should just do it for free because he's community based, right? And we have to change that mindset. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much of it is funding. Probably most of it, you know, for those people who are, you know, behind the scenes and know the and knows the budgets and things like that, because you have to make some cuts based on what your budget is. But I know that our young people need us more right now than ever. It's because they already have been at a disadvantage, but now they're certainly, you know, behind the 8 ball. So we have to really put our minds together, create these think tanks to really pull a rabbit out the hat to make sure our young people we can re-engage them back into school, because it's so hard right now for them to thrive and to motivate them. So we need to be able to motivate them in order for them to, you know, want to thrive and do well in the world, for them to understand their place in the world. It's hard. I think we're up against such a fight. And I don't know what the answer is.
And so as we think about this, right? Because one of the things, you know, I'm thinking about in terms of, you know, when you know, as I'm studying, you know, what Amiri did in 1972 around the National Black Political Agenda Convention, in terms of developing a national Black agenda, one of the things he talked about was, of course, creating a structure, but education is one of those pillars, right? So, and if we're talking about funding, if we're talking about education, we have to talk about creating a national model that works for Black people that is going to be curative, right? Because what I'm hearing is that we have to do a lot of curing. We have to cure young people of some of the ills that they're suffering, right? Because if you talk about what they walk through on a daily basis, just trying to get to school, and then when they get there, like you said, they're hungry, right? We have to cure them of some of those issues that they have in order to be able to reach them to change their lives. And I would venture to say then, as we listen to that, that's not an issue that exists just in Newark. That is an issue that exists in Black America, right? And I'm saying Black America that where the wealth gap is below the poverty line, because people who have access to wealth, right, and has access to wealth, have access to a better quality of education. Right. Even in the city of Newark, the kids who are taught at Science High School have access to a better quality of education and a better quality of teachers than they do at other schools. Not that they have a better quality of teachers who are willing. The problem is that the kids that they're teaching are already operating from a lower level than those kids who are going to school at other schools. So that's why I'm asking the question when I say how much of that has to do with that. But I think, Keisha, that we've got to begin to develop a national model that works for all Black children in this country.
Let me add to that, Ed, because one of the things that I think should happen, that just to build on what you're saying and build on what we're all talking about, is that and as I was alluding to, the Amistad Committee, all of that is that we need to dare to push for an anti-racist mandate in public education. Right, an anti-racist mandate in public, right? The mandate to push into being that very thing that you're talking about, and that very thing that we're all working on in the different spaces that we're in, trying to make do. So often, definitely in more instances, not with not enough of what we need to begin with. That's why our conditions are always in this place, where so many of us are hurt, so many of us are damaged, so many of us need healing and curation, as you just alluded to.
Right. Right. And I think that, because the sister who wrote that book, and the man I talked about this some years ago, the sister who wrote that book, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, I forget her name.
Joy Degree.
Right.
Great sister.
And when she talked, one of the things she talked about was, and the man, I agreed, we've never had a post-traumatic slave syndrome. Right.
We have it present right now.
Is right. It's extremely present for us.
Right.
And because we've never really gotten that kind of curative services, right, from the very country that has done it to us, we're trying to survive, right, when we haven't even been cured. So that's difficult. We're always just putting a Band-Aid on an infected issue that is current and present in our lives, right? And so that's why I'm saying we've got to look at creating a national model that we begin, and I'm going to bring this up on the Sunday call with the mayors on Sunday with Mayor Baraka and Mayor Lumumba about us working on creating this national educational model that we can get Black folk around the country to vote on. And I think one of the first steps has to be, we have to talk about how do we begin to cure young people, right? Because if you're talking about 7 to 8-year-olds, we got to reach them at that age. Well, we've got some preschool stuff that really needs to be happening, but you need funding in order to make that happen.
Right. Absolutely. So the funding is certainly important. And then we just have to make sure we tie it the right way with the right people, which is the most important. And so as you're talking about a national model and you're talking about a national, curriculum for our people, I'm going to, take it and engage. It needs to be because at the core of it is trauma, right? So then that anti-racist and cultural competence, I see Principal Confele and Baba Zaid talking about that anti-racist and cultural competence training, curriculum and model. It also needs to be trauma informed. But for me, being trauma informed is not enough, right? After you're informed, then what? So now how do we have engagement, right? So it needs to be culturally trauma engaged, activated. We got to do some activation, and then we need to be executing. And so it's not enough to just stay being informed about this stuff. We got to start to move with it.
And we got to go hard in the next 2 years. That's why we are proposing, right, Keisha. That's why we're proposing, Mayor Baraka and Mayor Chokwe Lumumba. That's why we're proposing this in 2022 to do the 50th anniversary of the National Black Political Convention in the city of Newark. But all of these models have to be created because, as I just said, as I'm studying now, Amiri Baraka and what he said and what he did and what he laid out at the 1972 convention, what he talked about was creating the structure. Then he said once that structure was created, you needed you needed all of these national models for Black people, not colored people, but he said Black people, right? So if we're talking about creating an education or a Black model for educating students that remove all of those negative stigmas in it, if we talk about a national health issue, a national health model that moves that negative stigma, because remember, all of these are institutions that were created via Jim Crow that did all of those things to prevent Black people from being able to progress in this country. And so a lot of what's wrong with us now are those issues, but I think that we have to create these national models, you know, for in order to change. And I'm saying we've got to go hard in the paint for the next 2 years while this man has control over the House and the Senate, and black folk put him there. We've got to put pressure on them in order to begin to get done. But we've got to work locally so that mayors like Baraka and Lumumba can get the funding that they need in order to do the work that Akeisha Yuri need to be able to do locally in the city of Newark and in the city of Jackson, Mississippi.
Absolutely, Ed, and I agree. I certainly agree, and I see some of the comments on the side. Ray Black talks about we didn't march. There was no march when they took the money, you know, away, millions of dollars from North public education system, and so we got to get that money back. He's exactly right about that. And Kaseka talks about instead of trying to push white people to do what they're never going to do, we need to set up our own weekend schools like every other ethnic group. That's and he said he's putting together a model that Ed is talking about. And you know, Kai Sekaway is the founder CEO over at REFAL, Restructuring Economics for African Liberation and African Love. That's REFAL. And they've been in the community for a long time. And so we have to have our own institutions, and we have to be able to model and show our young people that we own things and that we can be better than, you know, what they're seeing. So we have to model and be the model, create models, but also be that. So, you know, we have a long way to go, but I think that we can do it, right? I think that we know what we need to do. I think the blueprints have been written and left behind for us by several folks. We talk about Amiri, you know, Garvey, like all of our great folks left behind blueprints for us to follow.
That's right.
And so I think that we have the skills, knowledge, and abilities to be able to do it. We just have to execute it. Even though we're up against, you know, systematic oppression, we're up against, you know, systemic things that get in our way. But I think that we can still do it. But I think that it's going to take resources. Absolutely, it takes money. It takes us organizing and pushing. It takes us having these hard conversations and us having platforms in order to get these conversations out. If I were people to stay engaged in politics, all politics and local, and we have to be engaged in our local politics to understand
That's right.
In the context of the bigger world. And so I certainly appreciate you for having me on the show tonight. Certainly not a stranger to the show. And I think that the conversation should be continued.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We love having you back on. We always learn so much. And always impressed by the work that you do, the very incredibly important, groundbreaking work that you do. Like a lot of people talk about what needs to be done. We talk about the programs that we need. We talk about a lot of things in the future, but I really respect you because you are implementing those solutions now. And you're like, study what I do, repeat it, see what works, see what doesn't, but you are on the ground doing stuff now. And I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And I have a team, right? So we have a team of folks, you know, that works alongside, that's pushing and nudging. And so I can't do it alone. Certainly, you know, Newark Anti-Violence Coalition is in the heart of the work that I do. And people like Principal Kafele and Kaseki, you know, people in the community that coaches me, pushes me, but it's not me, right? It's a collective effort. And so this is always, you know, Ed and you as well, Jonathan. So this is collective, and Donna as well. So this is our collective wins, right? Our collective victories. And we don't always get a lot of victories, but these are our you know, small victories, and we have to, you know, take them as we get them.
Okay.
And as we close, and Jonathan, I just want to say that there are in the South Orange Maplewood School District, I forgot the brother's name, but there are freedom schools within
TJ Whitaker, the Maps of
TJ
Freedom.
Whitaker. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Zaid.
No, listen, you got it. TJ Whitaker, the Maps of Freedom School. Go ahead, make your point.
So it is being done here on a local. We need to replicate that and do it. And it's always interesting to hear TJ Whitaker, you know, to hear the dynamics when he went to this city and this city. But he did go, and where he got it started was in South Orange and Maplewood. And we need to replicate it and get it in our other cities.
Absolutely. And we don't need big, big structures to do things. Early in our history, schools were taking place in basements and people's houses and churches. And so it's not about the building structure, right? It's about what's being taught in them. So, we have to, really, really, get out of the mindset of, these building structures. So now that we're in COVID, none of the school buildings are being utilized, but education.
How about that?
Education is relative. It can happen anywhere. It can happen anywhere. And so, we have to, really get our think tanks together so that we can, really execute. But we're doing the small things. We have people who have community schools, who have small liberation schools, independent schools. We have the NIA school, in the city of Newark. We have the Muslim schools, so we have, different types of schools where our young people are learning and they are thriving. We just have to highlight it a little bit more as well, because we just don't know what's happening, what's going on. But as we, continue to invest in our young people, that's what they say, right? You don't have to, if you intervene with young people, you don't have to fix older people, right? So, really, really starting to do early intervention will help us on the back end, that we don't have to be reactive later.
All right, Miss Keisha, who are you listening to? You know the question. Who are you listening to these days? Who's your favorite hip hop artist and or group?
Oh man, I don't even know these days. I don't have nobody these days. But my answer is gonna always be Tupac. My favorite person in the world. That's who it's gonna always be. But I certainly love the Rakims of the world. I love the Poor Righteous Teachers of the world. Our brand Nubians, like the old school folks who had messages, positive messages, where they was teaching and dropping knowledge. That's when being smart was, in, right? It was popular.
Love you, girl.
Love you more.
All right, y'all. John, we can shut it down. We're running late. And Keisha, we thank you so much.
As always, thank you so much. It's All Politics Are Local, America's number one political hip hop radio talk show. Thank you so much for being back on again and telling us all the good things that you do. Another good show. Talk to you later. And the week of the White Riot of 2021 is over. And hopefully we'll have
White Riot.
Some better news.
All of Jonathan's friends.
Oh, that's what I thought it was a thing. I thought everybody called it the White Riot. The White Riot of 2021. I just thought it was it. I thought it was the White Riot. I thought it was a thing.
Did you see the one? Did you see the picture with the brother in there? That's what one
Negro. Yeah, that's
right. He was like, "Yo, they just told me to come with them." They were just like, "Hey, we're gonna have some fun. We need somebody. We'll pay you." They were like, "All right, right."
Wrap it up.
Yes, sir. Okay.
All right. Talk to you later, man. Until next week.
All right.